Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto has Minato knowledge part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. The first sensation he had was that of pain. Pure, unadulterated agony radiated throughout his entire being, making him all too aware of every blazing nerve ending. With a clench of the teeth, he managed to bite back a low groan at the pounding behind his eyes that threatened to drive him back into unconsciousness. Instinctively, his arms rose to clutch at his aching temples, only to find the way blocked. His hand struck an obstacle only a few inches after being lifted. Amidst the pain, the man was able to register surprise at the impediment. Again, he attempted to bring his arms towards his head, only to find the obstacle unyielding. Turning his hand's palm up, he felt for the barrier and gave a tentative push. Nothing. Hands moving along its length, he realized it must extend to cover his body fully. Upon examining its breadth, tense knuckles brushed against new barriers on either side of him, similar to the ones above. Panic now began to settle in. With a startled yelp, the man began to push at the obstacles around him, desperate to drive the suffocating walls away from him. A small part of him, the part of his mind that wasn't currently overwhelmed by pain and panic, was expecting it. A sliver of consciousness that was forever a shinobi took stock of his condition, even as he began to give in. His body was weak to the point where even the slightest physical exertion sent shivers of agony coursing through his system. He realized he was desperately low on chakra, although that thought still hovered on the edges of his awareness, still incomprehensible. Suddenly, a flow of images streamed into his consciousness. A red-haired man, a blonde boy, and hundreds of small, green lights. The torrent of memories drew out of him an unrestrained groan. His eyes scrunched tightly shut in an effort to blot them out. It made little difference. An abysmal throbbing headache struck with a vengeance, the waves of pain lancing through his core. Sheer panic led him to bypass the pain and move his legs. Stretching, along with bringing a new wave of agony, only served to bump his head and feet on new barriers. He was trapped. The thought made him gasp, in fear this time. Eyes opened wide out of reflex, yearning to see a pinprick of light in the overpowering darkness that was engulfing him. His physical state was pushed to the back of his mind as he used the little that remained of his strength to free himself from his tight prison, to no avail. The air in the small space was stale and choking. It set his chest on fire only to draw a breath. His mind was clouding over as a haze began to dull his senses. However, he wouldn't give up. Not yet. With a desperate cry, the man arched his back, the very core of his being seeming to reach out of his body. Though he had yet to understand what he was doing, he knew what he was reaching for. Light. At the very end of his senses, for he was no longer using his vision, he could detect a faint light, a beacon in the darkness. It was weak, but most definitely bright enough to guide him to it. He knew not if he could make it, but the pressure on his chest told him he had no time. Going entirely on instinct, the man sucked in a breath and reached for the light. Instantly, the pressure in his lungs eased. The feeling of touch disappeared entirely. The shinobi had the sensation of almost being pulled apart as he traveled towards the light, eyes unable to close, mouth agape in a silent scream. Although the journey seemed to take an eternity, in truth, it was over in less than 2 heartbeats. His body struck down onto rock, the force of impact leaving him winded for a second. As soon as his lungs cooperated, however, he drew in a breath that brought on a new onslaught of pain. Ice seemed to freeze his very insides as the cold, crisp air flowed into his lungs, making them hurt with the very force of working again. With the cold came precious oxygen that drove away the haze that had begun to blanket his consciousness. Awareness slowly started to return to him. He realized he was lying on a rocky surface somewhere outside. His every muscle was still cramping, but his headache had started to recede with the return of air to his system. The man was still gasping desperately for air, the cold sensation of its current into his body giving him a lifeline to cling to. For the longest time he lay there, feeling unable to even move. Idly it occurred to him that he was very weak, chakra depleted, his mind informed him. Chakra, he knew that term. Had used it recently. Recently? Again, the jumble of images returned to him, now joined by a fresh torrent, a woman with bright eyes and flaming red hair, a dark, starry sky, a peaceful, sleeping village, a bright, nine-tailed fox. The fox. At the thought of it, his eyes, the color of a cloudless summer sky, opened forcefully, only to close again as the bright light stabbed into them. Going against the screaming from every nerve receptor in his eyes, he forced them open once more, only to meet a disturbing sight that barely registered in his mind. He was high up, overlooking a deep crater bordered by what appeared to be heavily damaged crimson walls. Rubble was scattered everywhere, and huge dust clouds had yet to settle. Tears rose to his eyes, though he had yet to understand why. For several minutes he let them fall while his mind had time to begin to heal itself, to piece together the fragments that were his memories. Again, the image of the blonde boy came to his mind and, with it, a deep sense of urgency. He knew the face, knew the smile and voice that accompanied it. Despite his best efforts, he knew he was still helpless. That brought on an even deeper sense of urgency and despair. He needed to move, but to go where? Naruto. The name came in a flash and with it, remembrance. In a flash, the torrent of memories sorted itself into a coherent stream that brought with it understanding. Worry and fear now mixed in with the panic still coursing through his system. He had to go to him, go to Naruto. That thought, above all else, dominated his consciousness. With a superhuman effort, he ignored the pain and pushed his body up on feeble arms. The world spun furiously. He had yet to get his bearings. As soon as he was upright, if upright he even was, he staggered dangerously and felt the ground giving way under him. Emptiness greeted his body as he started to freefall, the world spinning around him out of control. Dizziness had overcome him, and the bout of vertigo was enough to overwhelm his already stressed body. As his eyes rolled back into his head and he let the tension in his muscles go, the last thought that passed through his mind was Naruto. They stood together in a white plane of existence, standing across from each other. As your eyes met, each conveying grief, love, shock, and resentment. For the first time in 16 years, father and son stood face to face, each overwhelmed by emotion. For Naruto, seeing his hero, the fourth Hokage, was more than he could have ever dreamed of. The fight with pain forgotten for a moment, he basked in the awe of meeting a legend. More importantly, he was awestruck by the revelation. His hero was his father. Seeing one of the parents he had never known brought to the surface emotions that he had suppressed years ago: pain, loneliness, guilt, a longing for something more. As he stared into the man's gentle, kind eyes, he felt tears spring to his own. Finally, after all these years, he would have answers. Answers that he had always needed. Why had the fourth chosen him? Of all people, why didn't his parents stop him, or take their son back? Since he was the fourth's own child, he suddenly realized that the man in front of him had sealed the demon fox into his own child. Fractionally, his eyes widened. He had only begun to understand why he had grown up without his parents, and the man in front of him now held the answers to the questions he had always wanted to ask. For Minato, his emotions were almost as overwhelming as they were for Naruto. He had been pulled into sudden awareness when the eighth tail had sprung into existence. For several moments, the former Hokage had been immersed in the Kyuubi's malevolent chakra, wondering what was going on. As he sat dazed, his final memories flashed before his eyes: the fox, the ceiling, his and Kushina's final gift to their son. In an instant, he had understood. He had recovered his bearings just in the nick of time to stop Naruto from releasing the seal he and his love had given their lives for, and standing there, he had gazed at his son, his grown-up son. It took everything he had to not cry right there and then. It was even harder when he saw the boy's expression when he revealed himself as his father. Meeting his son's gaze, he saw tears start to trickle down his cheeks, and again, he fought the moisture rising in his own eyes. He found the surge of pride and love that surged through his chest strange. After all, he had only met his son for a few scant minutes. Nevertheless, he realized that he loved the young man in front of him more than life itself. He couldn't help the warm smile that spread across his lips. Dad, the title Naruto called him by, filled him with both a deep sorrow and joy. He was ready to reach over and ruffle his son's hair when the wind was knocked out of him. Naruto had punched him in the stomach. Hard. Why did you seal the Kyuubi inside your own son? Naruto demanded, taking the former Hokage aback with his outburst. The tears were flowing freely down his face, and a look of utter desperation settled onto his features. Do you know what I went through because of that? All the adults looked at me with contempt, and I couldn't make any friends. I wanted people to accept me, so I trained really hard to become stronger. Then I met Iruka-sensei and Kakashi-sensei and Pervy Sage, and I was happy because they helped me get stronger. Naruto burst out, the words pouring out of his mouth in a rush. His voice fluctuated from high to low, never losing the desperate tone to his words. All Minato could do was listen to his son, a dumbfounded expression on his face. But because of that, a group called Akatsuki came after me and I had to train even more. I got to be even stronger, but Akatsuki still killed my friends. But what am I saying? He groaned to himself, clutching at his own hair. The sight of his son so confused and in such turmoil almost broke Minato's heart a second time. Damn it, am I supposed to be happy or mad? I don't know anymore. The youth asked himself out loud. Minato had no answer for him. At the sight of his tears, his pent-up emotions, finally starting to subside, Minato smiled softly. Naruto, he asked softly. How old are you now? Amidst sniffles, Naruto answered 16. With a mumble, still drying his eyes. The love and sorrow on Minato's face only grew. While you're already 16, huh? He asked his son quietly, his voice soft and tender. It must have been hard for you. I'm sorry. After 16 years, he had finally said it. With the apology, Minato felt a burden leaving his chest. I suppose that after sealing the Kyuubi into my own son, I don't have the right to act like a father and apologize. It's all right, Naruto answered, finally looking up at the man he now knew to be his father. I am the son of the fourth Hokage, so I can handle it. The youth missed the mixed expression that graced the fourth's face. I sealed half of the Kyuubi's chakra inside of you because I believed that you could control it. Because you are my son. As your eyes met again, one filled with surprise and the other gentle love. Understanding settled between the two shinobi and, for the first time since they had met, Naruto mirrored his father's smile. I wish I could see you more, Naruto. Minato said softly, causing his son's eyes to widen again. But my chakra's starting to run low. I will rebuild the seal, but it'll be for the last time. His voice was soft as he reached for his son's stomach, repairing the seal with a quick burst of chakra. Already he could feel himself starting to fade. Naruto's shocked expression turned into a pleading one. Please don't go. Not yet, he said desperately, cut off when Minato put a hand on his head and smiled sadly. My chakra is fading. Minato answered with a heart-wrenching smile. I don't have much time now, but I don't have the answer to Pain's question. I don't know what to do to bring peace. I'm not smart, or a great ninja. Everyone's asking too much of me. The youth exclaimed, gazing up at his father with a fearful expression on his face. I believe in you, Naruto. Minato answered gaily. I believe that you will find the answer. The fourth believes in me? Why? Because to be a parent is to have unwavering faith in your child, isn't it? Minato replied softly. He met Naruto's perplexed gaze, elated when he saw the determination return to his son's face. Stay with me? He asked uncertainly as he released him. The fourth Hokage smiled sadly again and nodded. As long as I can. The hollow tree was dark. Then again, he had expected nothing less. Naruto swallowed with difficulty, torn by emotions. Anger flared in him. Hate flared in him. This man had killed so many, Hinata, Kakashi-sensei, Jiraiya and so many others. Whatever he did, he couldn't stem the flow of pure hatred he held for the one called Pain Nagato. However, as he walked into the shadowy interior, he felt it, a warmth radiating from his very core. His father's love and encouragement. That was enough to make the young shinobi focus on what was at stake, and what he had to do. He concentrated not on his hate, as he had done earlier, but on the love he felt for those he held dear. Now, he had an answer. It was still sketchy in his mind, but he was determined to defend it. As the shadows envelop him, he remembers his words to Inoichi Yamanaka earlier. I want to go alone. A warm haze of amusement is almost enough to make him smile. He's not alone, he could do this. Conan, get back. The voice was deep, throaty. The blue-haired Kunoichi who had stood in front of him glanced back over her shoulder, doubt written clear in her eyes. But, it's alright. Now that he was closer, Naruto glared at the husk that was Pain. He appeared to be literally skin and bone, with long crimson hair hanging limp and matted down his back and across his shoulders. His eyes shone in the darkness, reflecting the metallic light that was the legendary Rinnegan. Despite his determination, Naruto felt a shiver run down his spine, a shiver of hatred he didn't attempt to suppress. His glare hardened. Are you the real Pain? He demanded of the man, his voice tight and angry. So peace has stumbled upon me. Nagato answered back serenely, clearly mocking him. Unbeckoned, images came to him, of Jiraiya and Kakashi's bodies. Clenching his fist, Naruto felt tremors start to flow through his body. All he wanted was to release this anger and pain, to have his revenge. Pain seemed to sense that. Do you hate me? Obvious answer. You're facing the object of your vendetta. Do you want to extract your revenge? His words were a challenge. Naruto could sense as much. The tremors in his body intensified as he struggled to suppress his emotions, to think clearly, most importantly, to do the right thing. As he thought torn, the kunoichi from earlier seemed to want to break the tense silence. Even if you kill Pain here and exact your revenge, nothing in the world will change. All that will come is self-satisfaction. He knew she was right. His mind told him to accept her logic, to calm himself, even though his heart was yearning for him to form an attack and take this man's life. As the thought passed through his mind, he felt his father's chakra flare weakly. Minato didn't have the luxury of communicating directly with his son, and his chakra was running on low. A single thought reached through to Naruto. This monster that we call hatred won't die while there still is a shinobi system. All it will do is give birth to more pains. To be a shinobi is to confront hatred. Each and every one of us battles hatred. Jiraiya-sensei trusted you to find a way to end this hatred. His words made Naruto hesitate more, torn between what he wanted to do and what he knew was the right path. Nagato had his gaze fixed on him, emotions dancing in his eyes that the youth couldn't place. If you do not have the answer, then there is nothing you can do but to sacrifice yourself for the peace that I will create. Without warning, a black stake launched itself from the contraption he was seated on. Watching through Naruto's eyes, Minato was horrified as the stake drove itself into Naruto's torso, blood trickling down onto the ground. The chakra imprint winced as the pain resonated through their consciousnesses, but he understood. From this close distance, I can easily control your movements with my chakra. Pain stated. Rest assured, I have avoided hitting your vital spots. Minato flared indignantly at his self-assured, smug tone. That's a relief. He thought dryly to himself. That's because you are invaluable, Jinchuriki. The man concluded. His eyes widened in surprise when Naruto met his gaze, irises altered to a crimson color as the Kyuubi's chakra flared in him. Minato called out as the red chakra flowed through Naruto's system while he was powerless to control it, but he quickly understood. Naruto was channeling the Kyuubi's chakra into the chakra receptor Pain had stabbed him with, neutralizing his chakra hold on him. The fox's noxious chakra flowed into his emaciated form, causing him to convulse. Conan glanced at her longtime companion worriedly, resisting the urge to go help him sit up. "What's wrong, Nagato?" she demanded anxiously. The redhead didn't answer, staring at Naruto in wonder and shock. The Konoha shinobi didn't look at him, a hand clutching one knee in support. "I came here to talk to you," he stated in a slightly trembling voice. "But I also wanted to confirm something." "Confirm something?" Nagato seemed as if he couldn't believe his very ears. "I wanted to test my feelings," Naruto answered flatly. Both Minato and Pain listened to him enraptured. "If I stood in front of my enemy," he continued, "what would I do?" "I wasn't sure of myself," he murmured, almost to himself. Pain's eyes narrowed. "And?" Naruto clenched his jaw, the tremors racking his body intensifying. "After all, I really can't forgive you," he proclaimed, shaking hands clutching the chakra rod impaled in his stomach. "Even now, I want to kill you so badly, I can't stop shaking," he exclaimed even more loudly, crimson eyes glaring death at the rain. The situation was bad, Minato thought, but, despite everything that had happened and was still happening, he smiled. He trusted his son. With a grunt of pain, Naruto pulled the chakra rod out of his belly, astounding both Conan and Nagato. With a yell, the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki shot forwards, aiming a punch straight for Nagato. Conan reacted instinctively, moving to intercept him, while Minato sent another warm flutter of chakra, weaker this time, to stop his son. "Naruto, I want to stop you, but I'll believe in you," he thought to himself sadly. He wanted to step in so much, to tell his son that that wasn't the way he wanted to go. Something held him back, however. This was Naruto's choice and, no matter what, he had to make it. After all, he had no right to act like a father. He needn't have worried, however. On his own, Naruto skidded to a stop before he clashed with Conan. His face had lost the hatred it was displaying before. Now only pain and grief adorned his features. Pervy Sage believed that the day would come when people can truly understand each other, he said in a voice laced with sorrow. I wasn't paying much attention when he told me that. Even though he told me he trusted me to find the answer. As his tone calmed down, his body relented its hold on him, and his shoulders sagged. Minato just stared, pride swelling in his chest. It was getting harder and harder for him to focus. Things were starting to blur. I got excited, taking it as a sign that he acknowledged me as his student. Thinking back, I finally understand what Pervy Sage meant. It's really not so simple. Still, you said that you cannot forgive me? Pain commented flatly. Words of forgiveness come easily. Love does not. Yeah, you're right. Jiraiya Sensei's words reflect an idealism of an era long past. It's impossible. Didn't you say that you were going to kill me and bring peace to the shinobi world? He asked. Naruto finally looked up at him, the redness receding from his eyes. Even if you kill me for personal satisfaction, if that's your idea of justice, so be it. You're not a god. After witnessing this harsh reality, do you still believe in Jiraiya's silly ramblings? He demanded. To Minato, it almost seemed as if he was being defensive, protecting his own choices in life. Naruto looked torn, but forever calm. When I learned that you were Jiraiya Sensei's student, I wanted to ask you something. What? Naruto's gaze was hard as diamonds. How could the Pervy Sage's students turn out like you? He demanded angrily. I know that you're different from the other Akatsuki members who kill for the sheer enjoyment of it. But I don't know a thing about you guys. Tell me your stories, then I will give you my answer. Deep down, Minato felt pride swell once more. His features clamped into that bittersweet, regretful smile he had given his son earlier. Perhaps his only regret in sacrificing himself was not seeing his son grow up into the remarkable young man he had in front of him now. Pain fixed his son with a stern look. Very well. Both Minato and Naruto knew that the next few minutes would decide the outcome of this meeting. I will believe in Pervy Sage's words. The answer had both Nagato and Minato stunned. The former tried to pick apart his answer while the latter only smiled contently. How can you still believe in him? Nagato asked somewhat angrily. How can you trust in him when the world is so filled with hate? When you yourself hate me? How can you stand in front of me and smile? Because I want peace, Naruto said determinedly. Because I have people that believe in me to find the answer to the cycle of hatred. Because I will do everything to end this vicious cycle. That includes you, Pain. I carry Jiraiya Sensei's legacy. My name's a keepsake from his book. And like the Naruto in the book, I will never give up. Because then, I wouldn't be Naruto anymore. The hero would change, and I would be in a different story altogether. Nagato could only stare at the young Konoha shinobi, then relax back in his chair. Big words, he commented dryly. Big words for one who didn't dare to come alone. What of your companion? He asked, eyes fixated on Naruto's. What does your badly hidden companion think of your answer? Is he willing to let you talk to me, to not kill me as he must wish? What will your comrades make of your answer? Naruto blinked for a moment, taken aback. He hadn't expected his father's chakra to be noticed. For a moment, he worried about his father's reaction. Did he agree? Did he approve of his choice? Before he could begin doubting himself, a gentle nudge reached him. I believe in you to find the answer. I didn't lie to you when I said I had come alone, Naruto said, doubt leaving his visage. The chakra you are sensing belongs to my father, the fourth Hokage, sealed into me the night of my birth. As for his answer, he believes in me to find it. Surprise flitted across Nagato's face. I don't know what my comrades will think of my answer, but as long as there are people who believe in me, as long as I believe in myself, I will fulfill my dream. Believe it. Pain watched him silently for a few tense seconds, taking note of the determination in his eyes, the set of his shoulders. Very well then, Naruto Uzumaki, he said slowly. I think I shall believe in you as well, he said finally, making a hand seal. Conan's eyes widened as he proclaimed Geto art of Rin rebirth. The kunoichi made to stop him, but he interrupted him. Conan, it's all right. A green aura began radiating from him, engulfing the three. Naruto was overwhelmed by the feeling of chakra flowing around them, startled only by the uncomfortable feeling his father was emanating. Dad? He choked, trying to sense his father's weakening chakra. He could barely feel him, and, once again face to face in his subconscious, he could almost see right through the man's body. Minato smiled at his son gently, placing a hand on his son's hair. It's time for me to go, Naruto, he said softly, voice barely a whisper. I'm proud of you, Dad. He had become so used to his father's chakra near him, even if he had only known him for half an hour. Now that he could feel it fading, a sudden onset of fear washed over him. Don't go, Minato's smile was bittersweet. I must, Naruto. Despite the obvious sorrow in his eyes, his tone was still happy and gentle. It's time for me to move on. I'm happy I got to meet you. Once again, tears started trickling down Naruto's face. Naruto. I believe in you. I believe. The two were torn apart suddenly, Naruto stumbling as he was yanked out of his subconscious by a surge of green light that washed over the white plain like a tidal wave. It took him several seconds of rapid blinking to adjust to the outer world. The paper tree they had been standing in was gone. Bright sunlight shimmered down to them, illuminating Conan's bright hair. The kunoichi wasn't looking at him, but at Nagato's body. Pain was dead. His self-sacrifice filled the startled Naruto with hope. This couldn't be happening. No, it was impossible. Those thoughts kept chasing each other around and around the Jounin's head. Surely, he thought, such a thing was utterly impossible, inconceivable, unfeasible. It was as far removed from reality as was the sun never rising again and leaving the moon to rule the sky. Hatake Kakashi was confused, to say the least. The object of his turmoil? His long-dead sensei's unconscious body stretched out in front of him. The silver-haired Jounin stared at the man's face for a few seconds before resuming his nervous pacing, hands shoved into his trouser pockets. When Naro Shikaku had called for him urgently, he hadn't expected an emergency of this magnitude. No one else seemed to notice Inoichi's pale face. They were all too busy lauding Naruto and tossing him in the air. Kakashi himself had been too distracted to realize his comrade was out of breath and anxious. He was relieved himself, after all, and still shaken from returning to the world of the living. Kakashi! An urgent word was all it had taken for the Yamanaka to get his attention. Instantly, Kakashi focused on him and followed the Jounin back across the village ruins, towards the Hokage monument. We'd just gotten back and were surveying the outskirts of the village when we saw him. Inoichi had explained nervously. When we got to Hai, though, he was already unconscious. Shikaku had to grab him before he plummeted to the ground from atop the Hokage monument. He had added tensely. The silver-haired Jounin had barely been listening to him. His attention was focused on the blond young man as Shikaku checked him over for injuries. Despite how utterly insane the thought was, Kakashi couldn't ignore that the man looked exactly like his late teacher. They had the same body build, the same blonde hair, the same face. He was even wearing the blue ninja suit and standard Jounin vest his teacher had always worn, as well as the famous white coat bearing his title. To his knowledge, the only one of those coats still in existence was the one his sensei had been buried in. Is he hurt? He had asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Shikaku had looked up at him with piercing black eyes, then shook his head. Nothing worrisome, he answered. There are multiple scars over his body, but they don't seem new. He is severely chakra exhausted, however. I can't say much more. Sakura or Shizen will have to look him over. But how is this possible? Kakashi had exclaimed, losing his composure. Both eyes had widened, pain and a fragile hope evident within their depths. His quivering gaze was demanding an answer the genius wasn't yet ready to venture. I'm not yet certain, the Nara had replied. I want to ascertain a few facts first before I give you my theory. For now, just bear in mind that this is a day when many were brought back to life. In the meantime, let's bring him to Sakura or Shizen. His three companions had nodded, and Inoichi had gathered the unconscious man onto his back. That had been 6 hours ago. When the five had returned to the other side of the village, the congregation of people had dispersed. Groups and pockets of people had scattered all over the ruins of their village to gather materials, find potentially trapped people and start preparing temporary shelters. One group that had still been in place consisted of Sakura, Shizen, Shikamaru and Team Guy, with one peacefully slumbering Naruto leaned against Sakura's arms. However, air-content smiles had slipped when the five shinobi had reached them and they had instantly gotten to their feet at the sight of the unconscious man on Inoichi's shoulders. Now, Kakashi was pacing the interior of a small, makeshift tent erected near the center of the settlement. Temporary shelters had been constructed for the friendlier civilians while the shinobi and able-bodied would camp out around them in order to defend them from any incoming attacks. It had been decided that Naruto and Minato, Kakashi gulped at the thought of his sensei's name, would rest together close to Tsunade. The three of them would be the biggest at risk should anything happen. Glancing at his sensei's prone figure, Kakashi found himself following the familiar lines and planes of his face. Everything about this man was familiar, from the bone structure in his cheekbones to the way he furrowed his eyebrows slightly when asleep. He couldn't not believe that this man was who he appeared to be, yet at the same time, he couldn't allow himself to hope for it. He had been wounded so many times the scars would not fade so easily. Still, the silver-haired Jounin's emotions were in turmoil. With a jerk, he forced himself to stop staring at the man and resume his nervous pacing. Apart from satisfying his personal curiosity, Kakashi was there for a second reason: guard duty. He wasn't simply guarding the two sleeping figures from outside attacks, of course. He was also there in case his hopes were false. In the slightest chance that the man isn't Yandeme-sama, but an imposter, I want you there. Shikaka had told him, and everyone had agreed, including himself. He had even opposed letting Naruto rest in the same room, but there had been little choice. Again pausing as he paced, he looked at the two young men in front of him, and sighed. As they lay there close to each other, the Hotake couldn't help but think what he had believed all those years. Naruto was his teacher's spitting image. He had never known how many people had figured out who Naruto's parents were. The matter had been closed to discussion ever since the third had returned with the marked baby and his umbu with the two bodies. He could understand why some of the civilians wouldn't know, but most shinobi of his generation should have guessed. The name Uzumaki belonged only to the Hokage's wife. After all, what did you do this time, Naruto? He wondered to himself, sighing heavily into his mask. In the end, he was sure that this had something to do with Naruto, and how so many people had miraculously woken up from death. He was about to do another lap of the room. He heard rustling from one of the two beds. Turning around sharply, he saw his teacher's figure moving about slightly, flexing his extremities tentatively. He had yet to open his eyes. His face was scrunched up in discomfort, but he made no move to ask for help. Then again, Kakashi wasn't sure if he could even speak. The Jounin remained standing and alert, waiting for what the person would do next. After a few minutes, the man rested still on the futon, making Kakashi wonder if he had fallen back asleep. Just as he was about to move, however, the man opened his eyes slowly. Bright, azure eyes drew open slowly, blinking quickly a few times as their owner tried to make sense of the optic stimuli being fed to his brain. Kakashi froze. He knew those eyes all too well. He stood stock still as the man gathered his bearings and began to look around himself. His eyes passed over him to rest on Naruto, widening in shock. His lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. Shock was written clearly in his expression. Kakashi was about to say something when he realized the man was now smiling, a smile so tender and bittersweet that it made him close his mouth again. Silence hung over the tent as students stared at teacher and teacher stared at son for several long minutes. Finally, the man Kakashi was more and more sure was his teacher closed his eyes and turned his face in Kakashi's direction, blinking up at him slowly. "Sasukumo?" He breathed hoarsely, his voice cracking and raspy as if it suffered from disuse. Kakashi's eyes widened slightly, but the blond man continued. "And no. Kakashi?" He tried again, squinting slightly before he smiled again. Again Kakashi froze. He knew that smile, too. It was his sensei's smile, the one he had become famous for in the village. "Me Minato-sensei?" he asked, his own voice now breathless. He had been preparing himself for this moment for the past several hours, but he hadn't expected the emotions to still feel so raw, even after so many years. Tears rose unbidden to his eyes, even more so when he saw his sensei smile a little more, closing his eyes. "Aren't shinobi supposed not to show their tears?" he asked playfully, though exhaustion had begun to seep into his weary voice. The question made Kakashi quiver internally, then break into a soft, emotional chuckle. "Some dust got in my eye, I see." His teacher replied lightly and lay still, though his smile never slipped. When he next opened his eyes, they held a wistful look to them as he stared up at the canvas above them. A few minutes passed in silence before he moved his arms to rest palm down by his ribcage, elbows out. As he pushed himself up, his face clamped in a grimace, and he would have fallen sideways had Kakashi not reached out and caught him by the shoulder. Minato chuckled slightly once the fit of vertigo passed, looking around the tent, then up at Kakashi, who was standing behind him. "I'm steady now," he said quietly, his eyes sparkling, though on closer inspection, Kakashi could see that they were a bit feverish. By the look on his sensei's tired face, he could tell the older man obviously found their situation amusing. He disagreed. "I'm not so sure of that," he said, causing his teacher to flash him a sheepish smile. Though he was certainly in shock, Kakashi didn't allow his guard to drop. His sharp eyes took in everything from the man's expressions and body movements to the state of his chakra. So far, he'd not seen anything that could disprove what his heart had already accepted. This was his teacher, Namake's Minato, brought back from the dead. He had all his mannerisms down, and if his chakra and body were any indication, this man was in no shape to get up, let alone infiltrate a village. Even his voice was the same gentle, warm timbre he remembered it to be. As the two sat in another pregnant silence, they heard sound coming from the other futon to Minato's left. Sensei and student turned to see Naruto yawning hugely and stretching out. A drop of snot had made its way down his cheek and he wiped it away with his sleeve as he yawned again, and then cheesed, waking up abruptly. Huh? Eh? Wha? Where am I? Huh? Kakashi-sensei? He asked, looking up at the jounin who had crouched down in front of him. The blonde blinked at the content, almost mischievous expression on his face. A chuckle from his right drew his attention next and he turned, eyes widening comically at the sight of the person who was sitting next to him, one arm resting on his bent knee. Dad? He asked in a loud, stupefied voice, mouth hanging open. On his part, Minato just flashed his son a tired but warm smile. He wasn't ready for this, and everything was happening so fast he could barely process them. Hello, Naruto. Father and son stared at one another for a few long seconds. Kakashi crouched somewhere between the two uncertainly. Naruto's eyes were wide in surprise while all Minato could do was smile sheepishly. Neither of the two jounin knew what to expect. Kakashi didn't even know Naruto knew about his parents. As Kakashi was about to question his student, Naruto surprised both him and his former sensei, living up to his title of the #1 unpredictable ninja. With a yelp, Naruto pushed back the covers and leaped onto his father, sending them both crashing back down onto the futon and dirt-covered ground. Minato grunted as his son's weight barreled into him, but the blonde was oblivious. All right, he yelled enthusiastically. He brought you back, too. This is awesome. I've got so much to tell you and show you, and I want you to meet all my friends and oh, sorry. He finished sheepishly and sat up so that his father could breathe again. Minato's expression spelled utter bewilderment, fact which set both Naruto and Kakashi on alert. When he started laughing hoarsely, however, they couldn't help but join in, Naruto ruffling the hair on the back of his neck in embarrassment. For a few precious seconds, the three laughed together, stopping only when the flap to the tent was pulled back by a passing chunin. Kakashi-sensei, is everything all right? She asked anxiously, surveying the three shinobi. Yamanaka-san said to inform him should anything arise. Her green eyes flitted from his now standing figure to the two blondes, one stretched out on the ground, the other sitting. Everything's all right, he answered calmly, smiling at the girl. I'll report to Inoichi later. Nothing to worry about. The young woman nodded and let the tent flap close behind her. For a few seconds, silence hung in the air. Then, as if they had agreed upon it, the three began chuckling again. Kakashi stooped to help his sensei into a sitting position again, making a mental note to ask Sakura about his condition later. He had never seen his sensei so weak and dizzy. Of course, his concerned gaze was lost on Minato, who had eyes only for Naruto. He was smiling again, his eyes gentle and soft. What, I don't get a punch at the stomach this time? He asked somewhat teasingly, making Naruto look even more sheepish, if that were possible. Kakashi's eyebrows furrowed in confusion. He had watched the two ever his sensei's body had been recovered. Yet, the way the two reacted, he was certain the event must have taken place. Along with many things, he filed it away for future questioning. You look like you would fall over again if I hit you, Dad. Naruto replied with an awkward grin. Minato returned his son's smile, eyes closing almost against his will. Kakashi eyed his sensei surreptitiously. His face had grown paler, and he seemed to be in slight pain or discomfort. He could tell he was trying hard for Naruto's sake, but he just didn't have his son's amazing recovery power. There's food for both of you if you're interested, the silver-haired jounin remarked, drawing their immediate attention. Yeah, ramen! Naruto exclaimed, grinning wildly. Kakashi had to roll his eyes. He hadn't seen Naruto this excitable since before he left with Jiraiya. It was good to see him so happy again. Ever since Sasuke's defection, none of Team 7 were the same. Despite his enthusiasm, however, they couldn't escape their harsh reality no matter what. No ramen, I'm afraid, Naruto, he replied, keeping his tone light. Ichiraku's was destroyed, remember? But old man Tucci and Ayam-chan are alright, right? Yeah, they are. Kakashi smiled, reaching for a backpack that held travel rations. Food was being shipped to Konoha by neighboring towns and villages, but they would have to make do with rations for now. Naruto still looked a little dubious as he opened his protein bar, but his father's words made the young ninja look up. Konoha can be rebuilt. As long as the will of fire still burns in us, and there are still people who will call this village home, everything will be alright. Naruto's eyes widened at his father's tired, but honest expression. Kakashi was reminded of older and better times, when he would look at his sensei that trustingly as well. Despite his physical condition, Minato's azure eyes still conveyed the strength and determination that had inspired those around him to follow him, much like his sons. Mesmerized by his eyes, Naruto grinned and nodded. On! He half yelped cheerfully and dug into his food at a rate Minato was surprised at. Kakashi smirked behind his mask at his sensei's startled expression as his son tore through his food. After a few moments of content observation, the former Hokage turned to his own food, eating far more slowly. His next question was soft-spoken and quiet. Do you like ramen, Naruto? He asked, nibbling on his first protein bar as Naruto gulped down the last bite of his third. Naruto turned to him, grinning widely again. He beamed. It would be all he ever ate if we never went out on missions. Kakashi commented dryly, causing the blonde to grin sheepishly and ruffle the back of his head again. Kakashi-sensei, that's not true. You see, the rest of the conversation grew fuzzy as Minato blocked out the two's jovial bickering. The shinobi smiled as he closed his eyes, letting himself be immersed in their voices. So you like ramen and Naruto? He thought to himself, a bittersweet yet genuine smile gracing his lips. Guess he takes after you in taste, Kushina. Are you listening to him now, just as I was? Can you see me? He can't have met you yet. I always knew I'd be the first to go. He's grown up so much. He's just like you, isn't he? Naruto and Kakashi stopped talking when they heard a soft snuffle. They turned and blinked at their father and teacher respectively, smiling when the man shifted to get more comfortable on the futon, sound asleep. His exhausted face looked more peaceful in sleep. The only time the yellow flash ever appeared vulnerable was in sleep, after all. Kakashi brought a finger to his lips, giving his student his usual cheeky smile. Try not to be too loud now, Naruto. You should probably get some sleep, too. It's just gotten dark, and we've got a lot of work to do in the morning. Naruto nodded and finished his food, missing his frog hat as he lay down himself. By now, his body had mostly recovered from his fight with pain. With a little more rest, he'd be fit as a fiddle, which was just as good. The village needed to be rebuilt, after all. How does the situation look? When voices woke him, Naruto was sure that he can't have been asleep for more than a couple of hours. Rubbing the sleep from his eyes, he blinked sleepily around the tent. His father was still lying down next to him, chest rising and falling softly as he slept. The tent was still dark, so what had woken him? There doesn't appear to be any danger. He heard another voice reply, one which he recognized as Kakashi's. Everything matches up, mannerisms, expressions, even speech patterns. I've checked for any illusions, but there appear to be no jutsu taking place. I'm convinced he's the real deal. His tone was calm, even, perhaps a little flat. Naruto couldn't understand what was so serious. Someone, presumably the man Kakashi was talking to, let his breath out slowly. This sure complicates things. With Tsunade-sama out, the feudal lord will be pressing for a new hokage unless she wakes up. I was going to recommend you, but the council seemed to have other ideas. They want Danzo. Me? Even half asleep, Naruto could detect the surprise in his sensei's reaction. Better question, Danzo? Even after all that's happened? There aren't that many candidates to nominate in the village, Kakashi. Or at least there weren't. Both men fell silent at the implications the speaker was hinting at. Leisurely, Naruto's brain recognized the voice as that of Shikamaru's dad. How is he physically? The Nara asked again without waiting for Kakashi to comment. Weak, he replied. His chakra is still low and his movements are still quite stiff. When do you think he'll be able to get up? The Nara pressed him. Rumors have already begun spreading like wildfire. The quicker we set the record straight, the better our chances are at postponing the meeting, even unseating Danzo. Kakashi's tone was cautious when he replied after a small pause. You mean for him to take his seat as Hokage again? He asked warily. I hardly doubt anyone would deny him it if he appeared to have returned. Shikaku replied dryly. Another long pause hung over the two as Kakashi sighed and seemed to pace a few steps. Were he any other man, I would give him a full week in bed, perhaps even more. Knowing Minato-sensei's stubbornness and selflessness, however, I expect him to get himself up in the next few days, he said emotionlessly. Shikaku made a soft noise of agreement. Will he be up to a public display of his identity? The Hiraishin or Toad summoning would probably suffice. That would have to be up to him, Kakashi answered, once again keeping his tone reserved. Shikaku sighed and took a few steps closer. I know this is hard for you, Kakashi, but we need him. Konoha needs him. I'm overwhelmed to have Minato back just as much as you are, but I need to keep a level head. We need to keep a level head. Given the circumstances, he's almost like a godsend. We need to think and act quickly, for the good of Konoha. That's what matters most right now. There was another pause, lengthier than the previous one, and Naruto felt himself growing sleepy again. Finally, Kakashi sighed. When you put it like that, I'll talk to him in the morning. Those were the last few words Naruto heard before he fell asleep again, having strange dreams of Tsunade, his father, and a shadowy man dancing around a large pile of fallen garden leaves. Morning found father and son eating together in the tent, futon blankets wrapped around their knees. Naruto was talking loudly as he ate, still managing to eat thrice as fast as his father despite the latter being mostly silent, regarding his son with attentive blue eyes. And wham! Neji didn't even know what hit him. Naruto grinned, chewing a mouthful of granola furiously. He was currently regaling his father with various stories as they ate their fill of breakfast, more travel rations. They might not have been as delectable as fresher foods, but they were more than enough to cover their recovering body's needs, as Kakashi had put it. The silver-haired jounin had disappeared an hour or so ago, leaving the two alone in the tent. As Naruto talked, probably making up for lost time, Minato listened with a bittersweet smile on his face, asking questions here and there and making smaller comments. Even though I beat Niji, half the final round was cancelled when that bastard Orochimaru attacked Konoha, of course. Naruto finished with a sigh, staring at the dusty ground. The sudden sad look that entered his son's eyes made Minato want to reach over and pat him on the shoulder, but he doubted he'd make it. Besides, he wasn't sure how the gesture would be received. Instead, he settled on a smile and changed the subject. You know, when I entered Kakashi in the Chunin exams, an instructor came up to him and asked him if he wanted to hold his hand during the opening ceremony. He grinned brightly. In reaction, Naruto looked up in shock, then grinned as well. Bet Kakashi-sensei took that really well. He sniggered, settling back on the futon with a decidedly more cheerful look on his face. It was lucky Shikaku was as close as he was. The man could have suffered more grievous injuries than the bite marks on his hand. Minato supplied, glad to see the shadow leave his son's face. Even as the two chuckled, the tent flap was pulled back and the very man they were laughing at stepped into the tent, his exasperated expression clearly showing he'd overheard his sensei's comments. Though Naruto kept sniggering, Minato sobered up. The former Hokage's attention was focused on Inoichi and Shikaku, who entered the small tent behind Kakashi. The blonde didn't seem surprised to see them, though. He'd been expecting them ever since Kakashi left the tent. Good morning, Naruto, Minato, Shikaku said, and with a soft grunt, he seated himself on the ground in front of them. Inoichi and Kakashi didn't sit themselves, instead remaining standing by his side. As casual as I might sound, I never expected to see one of you again, he said, eyes focused on Minato. The blonde shinobi had the decency to look sheepish as he ruffled his hair. Honestly, Shikaku, I didn't expect to see you again either. Mind telling us about it? Inoichi asked none too subtly in a pointed tone. Always the more impatient out of the three squad members, the platinum blonde was staring directly at the former Hokage, only making him grin slightly. We need to know, Minato, Shikaku added more tactfully, his eyes glancing from Naruto to Minato. The former was now paying attention, his eyes moving from one jounin to the next. If we're to explain your return to the village, we need to know the facts. The council as well was implied, but not said outright. The situation's hard enough as it is without you being labeled as an imposter or a spy. I know. Minato sighed, running a hand through his long, untidy hair. He'd been dreading this moment ever since last night. He never liked long explanations. Naruto, I'm going to need your help, okay? He smiled gently at his son, who blinked uncertainly. Okay. Minato smiled at him again before his face turned serious, and he turned to Shikaku and the others. Before I offer my explanation, I need one clarification, he began, making the others tense, though Minato was looking at Naruto again. I lost you a few moments after Pain cast his final jutsu, he continued, thoroughly confusing the others. Thus, I can only guess at what it did. Did it resurrect people? He asked, openly hesitant at even suggesting the possibility. The present jounin turned to look at Naruto with surprise etched on their faces. They hadn't gotten his version of his fight with Pain yet. Naruto verified, looking downcast again. Nervously, his hands began to fiddle with the bedsheets around his legs. Nagato and I talked for a while in the end. He said he'd believe in me and that there was one last thing he could do. Bring back those he had just killed in Konoha. An audible gasp escaped Inoichi, but for once, the Yamanaka seemed lost for words. He said it was to stop the circle of hatred from continuing. Naruto sighed again, looking down at his hands. The way the three jounin were looking at him was making him feel uncomfortable, especially since he was partially mourning Nagato's death. Only his father seemed unsurprised and calm. He used some resurrecting jutsu that made all these little green chakra lights shoot out of him. The young man concluded, looking up. I remember, Kakashi commented, making everyone turn their attention to him. I was in a dark plane, sitting with my father and talking about, we were sitting together when this green light reached me. The next thing I knew, I was waking up next to Chuji. Though no one commented on his slip, his teacher's sharp gaze told Kakashi that he would be talking about this soon. Where do you come in, Minato? Inoichi asked him informally. You've been dead for 16 years. The bittersweet smile that graced his former comrade's features made the Yamanaka stop, however, and drop his semi-accusing tone of voice. I'm afraid it's my fault, Minato said gently, turning to smile warmly at Naruto, who again blinked in confusion. As you all know, 16 years ago I sealed the Kyuubi into Naruto, he began, sighing slightly. It was the last thing I could do at the time for Konoha. Kushina wanted to kill herself to contain the fox once more, taking it into death with her. That would have upset the balance of power between the villages, however, and it would have ensured that the Kyuubi would be rampant when it rematerialized on this plane. It wasn't exactly part of his recount, but it was obvious that the man needed to get the weight off his chest to explain a decision he'd been forced into making. All they could do was stare, especially Naruto, who gazed at his father with wide eyes. I guess I was a little selfish, too, Minato continued, a mournful chuckle slipping past his lips. His fist was clutching at the bedcloths, but he gave no other outward sign of distress. I couldn't let Kushina do it alone, and I wanted to fulfill her only regret, not seeing Naruto groan. So, I used the Shiki Fuin to seal half the demon's chakra within me, while sealing the other half into Naruto. Both me and Kushina were running low on chakra then. We were both almost spent. Here, he gave another soft chuckle. The room was deathly silent. When I completed the sealing of the Kyuubi's remaining chakra into Naruto, I sealed both of our remaining chakras within him. He finished, letting out a pent-up breath and looking up at them all again. You sealed your chakra inside your own son? Inoichi exclaimed. No one bothered asking how he knew, or whether it was true. Everyone gathered knew Kushina's surname, and Minato well enough to see them both inside the growing boy. Yes. Minato acknowledged at length. I did that way, we would meet him someday, even if it were for only a few minutes. I was to appear only should the eighth tail be released, as happened during Naruto's fight with the last pain. Here, Minato turned to his son, who was still in shock. Absent-mindedly, he nodded. Yet Dad appeared just as I was about to release the seal on the Kyuubi. As he uttered the words, Naruto felt a shudder go through his body. He hadn't realized until then how close he had been to destroying everything he held dear. He stopped me and rebuilt the seal. Wordlessly, Shikaku was nodding as he confirmed his suspicions. I still had a little chakra left, so I stayed with Naruto as he went to confront the real pain. Minato continued, smiling very briefly at his son. I was present as the two talked and Nagato cast his jutsu. I spoke to Naruto very briefly in that moment, then the white plane we were speaking in was swept with green chakra and I was torn away. After that, I can remember very little up until last night. The only things that really stuck were a sense of panic and claustrophobia. The only logical conclusion was that Pain's jutsu brought me back. When we found you, you were falling off your head on the Hokage monument. Shikaku informed him bluntly, taking him by surprise. Does that jog any memories? His knowing expression showed he knew more than he was putting forth, or at least guessed it. Minato nodded pensively. To be brought back, I would have to have a fresh chakra signature on the world, which I did. Nagato's jutsu could bring me back, because he could sense the residue of my chakra and know which soul to pull forth from the Shinigami's stomach. The last part he said with distaste. I would also need a body that hadn't suffered too much. He trailed off at that, distress crossing his face briefly. No wonder you weren't brought back, my love. He thought, then sighed and pushed the thought away. He would grieve later. The others didn't pressure him, giving him the time he needed. As I was the then Hokage, I doubt my body was cremated. He continued, voice faltering only on the first word. Most shinobi's bodies are destroyed upon death, and their names are carved onto the memorial stone. Hokages are an exception. I have no doubt my body was buried so that it would sustain minimal decay. That was always the practice, after all, he said distastefully. It was common knowledge amongst the high-ranked shinobi of the village that Orochimaru had stolen 2 of the then 4 Hokage's bodies. Should I have woken up in my coffin, he said nonchalantly, making the others wince in distaste at the thought, that would explain the panic and claustrophobia I well remember. Pausing for a moment, the fourth closed his eyes and furrowed his brows. Kakashi was concerned when he saw a shadow of fatigue pass over his face before his teacher opened his azure eyes again, looking tired and weary. I've checked again, and it turns out my suspicions were correct. The top of my head remains the only place that still bears a Horatian seal that's usable. I sense one more that's very close, but it's too damaged to use for my jutsu. Bright, expectant eyes turned to Kakashi, who drew a 3-pronged kunai out of his weapon's pouch. At the sight of it, Minato smiled softly and nodded slowly. I guess you must be referring to this, sensei, he said calmly. Still smiling, Minato nodded again. Even after all these years, he thought, feeling a rush of warmth filling him, despite his general numbness over the past 12 hours. A heavy silence hung over the 5 until Naruto broke it, clutching at his hair. I don't get it. For a few seconds the 4 jounin were frozen in shock, then they began to laugh, though Minato's was still somewhat hoarse. He looked healthier that morning, less pale and tired, but he was still far from his peak physical condition. If you did, I would be worried, Kakashi commented dryly after they were reduced to chuckles. Naruto pouted and stuck his tongue out at him, ready to bite back with a disrespectful comment when the tent flap was pulled back again. Naruto? A female voice called, poking her head inside. Strands of light pink hair fell in the young woman's green eyes as she gazed around the tent, landing on the Dwarf Hokage with a startled expression. Minato smiled at her and ruffled the back of his hair in embarrassment, but Naruto didn't seem to notice or care. Sakura-chan, he exclaimed giddily, beaming up at her. Kakashi's dig was already forgotten as he scrambled up. What is it? What is it? He grinned. The medic Nin replied, staring at the man that was the spitting image of the 4th Hokage. He looks just like the Yondaime, and Naruto looks just much like him, she thought to herself, distracted. Captain Yamato was looking for you. We're heading out with Sai to gather equipment from neighboring towns. He asked for you to come along. All right. The young blonde yelled, pulling on his sandals and forehead protector quickly. Finally noticing Sakura's dazed expression, he mistook it for sorrow. Don't worry, Sakura-chan, he said in his usual mix of seriousness and nonsense. Konoha can be rebuilt. His words were enough to draw Sakura's eyes to him, which was just as good. She wouldn't see Minato smirk, then. Is it alright if I go, Shikaku-akin? Naruto asked Inara, pulling on his jacket. It's not like I get anything anyway, he grumbled. Go ahead, Naruto. Kakashi smiled cheerfully, as he always did when he was covering up something. Alright. Naruto grinned and shot off with Sakura, barely flinching as he walked out into the bright sun. As soon as the two youths were out of earshot, Minato dropped his smile and turned serious. I notice you feel no need to warn him to keep quiet about my presence here. He commented lightly, eyes moving from one jounin to the next searchingly. Observation skills as sharp as ever, sensei. Kakashi replied just as lightly. Minato's eyes narrowed slightly, and he sat up more stiffly. I'm missing something. It wasn't a question, but a statement. Kakashi didn't dispute it. Sensei, we need to talk. Sakura let Naruto chatter for the both of them as they walked towards the meeting point with Captain Yamato and Sai. All around them, people, civilians and shinobi alike, were working to clear the debris and rubble from the crater that was once Konoha. Buildings had collapsed, leaving beams of wood and metal strewn across the dirt, walls broken in or collapsed. A few lucky structures still had some walls standing, primarily those made of stone. As they walked around through it all, groups were moving usable materials towards one site, while the others were being destroyed or, barring that, moved out of the village. Few people seemed to be smiling. Sakura couldn't blame them. They had just had their homes destroyed, their livelihoods ruined, and many of them had gone through the pain of losing someone. It seemed like a miracle that they'd been given their dead back, but their village was still in ruins. In the harsh conditions, very few could bring themselves to smile. Even people she knew to be naturally cheerful looked to be having difficulty. Apart from Naruto, of course. As he walked in front of her, hands clasped at the base of his neck, his shoulders were squared and his head high. By his gait, Sakura was sure he was grinning like a fool. She knew him all too well to read his body language. It brought her hope that, no matter what, Naruto was still smiling. If he ever stopped, she honestly didn't know if she could go on. It would be like the sun not shining anymore. Walking after him, that was exactly the image she suddenly had of him. Naruto was Konoha's sun, shining over it and lifting the village's spirits. The kunoichi allowed herself to smile slightly, though it was short-lived. No matter the will of the people, Konoha was still in the direst of hours. Their hokage was in a coma, with no guarantee she would ever wake up again. Their village was in ruins, with their economy, agriculture and trade completely cut off for the moment. The village had received a large amount of minor missions from the surrounding towns in support of them, but Konoha was still a long way off. Sakura-chan. The pink-haired medic Nin looked up, caught by surprise by Naruto's voice as she'd been wrapped in her own thoughts. The young shinobi had stopped and looked back at her, grinning. We're going to rebuild Konoha, believe it? He beamed, giving her a thumbs up. Sakura gave him a sad smile. We can rebuild Konoha, Naruto, but we still need a hokage, she sighed restlessly. At her words, Naruto frowned. Huh? But Granny Tsunade didn't resign, did she? He asked, puzzled. At the dumb look on his face, Sakura sighed again. No, Naruto, but she might be forced to, she said quietly. That stopped Naruto in his tracks, eyes widening slightly as he turned to her. When the village was attacked by pain, Tsunade-sama released her jutsu to save as many as she could. Ever since then, she's been in a coma. We don't know when if she'll wake up, but there are rumors that she might be relieved of duty. Konoha needs a hokage. We can't wait forever for her to wake up in the end. Her voice was sad and a little wobbly. At her words, Naruto frowned and paused for thought. No way can they fire Granny Tsunade, he said loudly, making Sakura start to shake her head. Actually, even if they can, Naruto interrupted her, Konoha still has a hokage. Without realizing it, the two had gradually started to talk in louder voices as they neared the edge of town, where villagers and shinobi alike were working. At Naruto's proclamation, a dozen heads rose to stare at their hero, frowning in confusion. The fourth Hokage's back. Even if Granny Tsunade's unable to be Hokage anymore, my dad can take her place. He grinned, any worry leaving his face. Sakura's, on the other hand, turned paler with anxiety. Naruto, you idiot! She hissed. Don't talk so low. Wait, your father? Naruto's wide, exhilarated grin was all she needed for an answer. Murmurs greeted Naruto's light-hearted proclamation as those around them began talking amongst themselves. Sakura stared at Naruto, her green eyes wide and shocked. Naruto's smile was just as broad, seeming just as elated as his childhood friend was surprised. Yeah, he's my dad, he said sheepishly, grinning all the wider. He told me when he appeared in my head to stop me letting out the Kyuubi. The whispers around them intensified at that. Naruto remained oblivious. Sakura blinked, trying to clear her head and take the new information aboard. So it's really him? She asked, her surprise getting the better of her. But he's been dead for so long. What the kunoichi's brain knew was instinctively wrestling with the information her eyes and ears had gathered. Fact was fighting reality, and the struggles showed clearly on her face. Yeah, I know, Naruto replied happily. But he did something so that some of his chakra was with me when he sealed the fox, and that sorta got mixed up in Pain's jutsu, and he's back just like everyone else. though I don't really get how," he explained awkwardly. Beyond his sheepish expression, however, Sakura could see the joy in his eyes, a joy she hadn't seen there for a long time. It brought a smile to her face, one which was quickly wiped off at the raised voices around them. "The force back?" someone yelled in astonishment. "You heard Naruto." Having forgotten that they had an audience, Sakura and Naruto turned around, giving the young woman startled looks. As more and more people started talking loudly, Sakura gulped nervously. "This is bad. Damn Naruto and his loud mouth." She thought, somewhat panicked as the small throng of people came closer, shouting questions, praise, and cheers. "I've got to get him out of here before he spills anything else." "Naruto, will the fourth really become Hokage again?" an older man asked her blonde teammate, eyes glittering with emotions the kunoichi couldn't quite decipher. It was clear, however, that he trusted Naruto as a source of information and miracles. Naruto mumbled in reply, a hand ruffling the back of his head. Before he could say anything else, Sakura clapped a hand over his mouth and smiled as sweetly as she could at the crowd. "I'm really sorry, but it's all still confidential information." She smiled nervously. "We've got a mission to complete, so please excuse us." Despite their protests, Sakura dragged Naruto away, hands still covering his mouth. He didn't protest, just let her tug him along, still grinning. Honestly, the kunoichi thought, sighing in exasperation. Just how much of an idiot is he, leaking top-secret information like that? Those people will gossip like no one's bussy-o. For a moment, the medic Nin stopped and stood still, sudden realization dawning on her. Head still in a headlock, Naruto blinked blue eyes up at her, still blissfully oblivious. "Sakura-chan?" he asked, voice muffled against her hand. He was taken aback when Sakura released him suddenly, causing him to stumble as he recovered his balance. "Sai and Captain Yamato are still waiting for us," she commented quietly, a serious look on her face. Naruto gazed at her for a few seconds, her sudden change in mood catching him off guard. A quick, calculated smile was all it took for him to grin again, though, and nod, leaving her in peace to think things over. "On! Let's get those materials!" He grinned with his characteristic shout and practically marched ahead, angling their course away from the village and towards its perimeter. When his back was safely turned to her, Sakura sighed and smiled a little fondly. "I guess Naruto's just being Naruto," she thought as she quickened her pace to catch up to him. Biting her lip, she frowned thoughtfully. "And that's exactly what they're counting on." "That's awesome, Captain Yamato." As always, Naruto's voice was loud and clearly enthusiastic. This time, however, a throng of people cheered right beside him, agreeing wholeheartedly with the statement. Their mission completed, Team 7 was assisting the various construction teams scattered around Konoha, as were all the genin and shunin. They carried materials and equipment, helped raise heavier objects, and occasionally assisted with various ninjutsu. Their team leader was an excellent example, erecting buildings with his wood-style ninjutsu, to the applause of many. "That will have to suffice for now. Thankfully, there are few injured. The medic Nin can make do with this for now. We leave the rest to you, Watanabe-san," the jounin said, wiping the sweat off his forehead. He had just single-handedly constructed the first floor of the new Konoha hospital. The carpenter in question grinned and saluted him amiably before turning to his crew and shouting orders. Sakura, the jounin, then addressed one of his teammates. The kunoichi nodded, having already anticipated his orders. "I already have orders from Shizen-san," she answered determinedly. "I'm to stay and organize the medic Nin Corps even as she tends to Tsunade-sama." Her team leader nodded in agreement. He hadn't expected to have to tell the medic Nin what to do. While she turned to instruct the builders and fellow hospital staff, Yamato turned to Naruto and Sai, managing to hide the evil smirk that threatened to shine through his carefully constructed mask. "I have other buildings to go set up. In the meantime, you two are to head to the main street district and begin clearing the rubble there." In reply, all he received were two nods. However, Naruto's face drew his attention. The boy was radiating determination and verve. "Perfect. You got it, Captain Yamato." He grinned and shot him a thumbs up. "We're going to get the village back in shape in no time." Many of the gathered villagers, civilians and shinobi alike, smiled at his declaration and waved him off, talking amongst themselves with happier expressions on their faces. Sakura didn't fail to notice. He really is their son, the village hero. She thought fondly, shaking her head before instructing the carpenter as to where to place the beds. "Naruto!" The voice was obnoxiously loud, rivaling even the blonde's. Dark eyes flashed in excitement as they laid upon his comrade, even beginning to tear up slightly. "You have managed so much with hard work. I can only hope to work thrice as hard, no, 10 times as hard to surpass you and aid our beloved village." At this predictable outburst, Naruto grinned sheepishly and ruffled his hair. Okay? What are you two doing here anyway, Lee? Guy-sensei?" The sight of the two spandex-clad shinobi wasn't something he'd been expecting, and running into them when unprepared was enough to faze even the hardiest of ninja. The older of the two Konoha green beasts adopted his nice guy pose and flashed a dazzling smile at Naruto. "Why, Naruto, we're here to clear the rubble, of course. In order to rebuild our great and wonderful village, Every shinobi has to wholeheartedly assist in the construction. I volunteered Lee and myself for rubble clearing, as it's the best training a shinobi could get. We're going to mold our bodies into symbols of eternal youth and work to rebuild Konoha at the same time. What a wonderful plan, Gai-sensei! Lee exclaimed, saluting his mentor fervently. For eternal youth and Konoha. Let's clear the main street in 3 hours. At the very mention of a time limit, Naruto and Sai looked around themselves. They were standing in what used to be Konoha's main street, which crossed the entirety of the village. It was blocked with rubble from the buildings flanking it and practically unrecognizable. A drop of sweat gathered at their temples. The debris is far too much to be cleared in 3 hours. Sai pointed out with a small, polite smile. Of course, he was completely ignored. No, Lee. Let's do it in 2 hours. If we fail, we must complete all the missions offered Konoha in 1 day. A splendid idea, Gai-sensei. Lee agreed enthusiastically. The two gave each other a thumbs up, then sped off to begin gathering rubble and carrying it to the village outskirts. Naruto and Sai were still frozen in place, blinking in confusion at the scene that had just occurred. Sai was the first to gather his wits. Are those two stupid? He asked with his characteristically monotone voice. He turned to Naruto, expecting him to agree with him. He should have known better. Naruto was grinning like a fool, eyes set and fists clenched. Alright. Let's do this. Shadow Clone Jutsu. I'm not going to let them outdo me. As the air filled with similar proclamations by a multitude of Naruto clones, Sai let out an exasperated sigh. What did I ever do to deserve this? Soon after Naruto left the tent with Sakura, Naruto Shikaka glanced at his watch before standing up. His expression was calm and serious, as always, yet there was a determined glint in his eyes. That will be enough for now, Minato. Given the circumstances, I doubt anyone will raise serious protests against your identity. Minato nodded in reply. Are you heading somewhere? He asked his familiar comrades when they moved towards the exit, azure eyes set. Without realizing it, he was entering a mindset his friends had fondly called Hokage mode. He knew Konoha was destroyed, and he couldn't help but hurt for his village. At his businesslike tone, Inoichi couldn't help but chuckle. I'm meeting Yumino Irika and Yuhi Kurenai, if you remember them, to check on the academy's status. Shikaku's checking in with the 5th condition. Instantly, those final few words set alarm bells ringing in Minato's head. Condition? He demanded. Inoichi paused momentarily, glancing from the blonde shinobi to Kakashi, then sighed. Taking the hint, the silver-haired jounin nodded. I'll explain everything, sensei. Turning to him, Minato regarded his former student for a long moment before nodding his consent. Again, Inoichi couldn't help but chuckle even as he followed Shikaku outside. Kakashi could well understand his amusement. Frail and pale, Minato's physical condition wasn't nearly adequate to support his demanding expression. Don't pout, brat. Came out of his mouth suddenly, startling his sensei. Kakashi had only meant it as a joke, but the dejected look that crossed his sensei's face made him wince sympathetically. He should have known better than to quote Jiraiya's words so soon. For several uncomfortable moments, Kakashi looked at his teacher while his teacher looked at the floor. The silence was becoming unbearable when Minato seemed to shake himself and look up, no sign of sorrow on his face. However, his expression was open and honest, letting show everything that was currently on his mind. It was an expression Kakashi had seen seldom on his sensei's face, one he knew cost him dearly to allow. I have so much I want to ask you, but I don't yet know where to start from. He heard the man say in a steady, yet soft tone which clearly betrayed how overwhelmed he was by everything. Before he would reply, the copy-nin surveyed his teacher, gauging how much he could or should reveal at present. In time, his sensei would learn everything. He would have to in order to take up his hat as Hokage again. For now, however, a summary would have to suffice. Geez, Minato-sensei. I would have thought death hadn't addled your brains. He replied lightly, standing up straighter and walking a few steps away so that his back was turned to the seated shinobi. Minato's azure eyes widened in surprise, stunned into silence. When one wants to start a narration, isn't the smart thing to start at the beginning? His tone was light, teasing, safe. The little act was enough to make Minato smile and bring him out of whatever mood he was beginning to sink into. Really, Kakashi? He thought fondly before clearing his throat. I suppose you're right. The beginning it is, then. When his student turned around to face him again, both their expressions darkened with the severity of the matter they were to discuss. Minato's voice had returned to its responsible Hokage timbre, the one Kakashi last remembered hearing him use. What happened that night after I sealed the Kyuubi into Naruto? Though he had been expecting it, the question still left Kakashi a little winded. He'd lost 2 dear friends that day. After you sealed the fox into Naruto, the third returned bearing your bodies along with 3 Anbu. He himself was carrying Naruto. The village was half in ruins, though many were saved thanks to the third removing the fox from the village, then you transporting it. Thankfully, those fires shinobi had yet to put out were doused by the oncoming rain. The third held your funeral in the morning. He had all of you together, you and Kushina, Kyo and Arumi Yuminorin. The last name was said in a very soft voice, eliciting a gasp from his sensei. Kakashi didn't want to look, but he couldn't help himself. He drew some solace from his teacher's shocked and wounded expression, took solace in knowing that he wasn't the only one to miss her that much. For a moment, Minato looked like he wanted to say something, then swallowed with difficulty. Go on, he said in a strained voice. The dismal mood was returning, but the subject demanded it. Their dead deserved it. Silently conversing with their eyes, the two decided to leave personal matters out of the narration. Yet, after your funeral, the third returned to office and began reconstructions. The Reikage and Kazekage were gracious enough to contact us and inquire as to the security of the Kyuubi. Hiruzen-sama, of course, gave few but pointed answers to both. Though his gaze had hardened at the mention of the two Kage, Kakashi almost seemed satisfied at the third's course of action. Konoha's strength wasn't contested, and we managed to pass any aggressive actions by. The Tsuchikage seemed well pleased, though. Now it was Minato's turn to glare briefly, before he sighed and looked down at his hands. What about Naruto? What happened to him? He asked, attempting to keep his voice as neutral as he could. He failed miserably. Kakashi smirked, reminded of the anxious, flustered Minato during Kushina's pregnancy. He knew his pain, however. He had felt it himself over the past 16 years as he saw his sensei's son suffer. At first, he was raised by the orphanage, though many would have taken him in. The third passed a law that forbade anyone from talking about his parentage, or the tailed beast he was hosting. I'm sorry, sensei, I should have tried harder. What happened? Minato's voice was calm when he interrupted his student's agitated apology, but pointed. Azure eyes met gray ones, shining light, liquid fire. Kakashi knew that look all too well. The yellow flash's eyes were legendary, after all, like his smile. He couldn't but do as his sensei bid him to and continue. After he was 8 and started at the academy, he moved into an apartment on his own, supported by the village fund. He was very lonely. Sensei, the villagers knew him as the Kyuubi's host and hated him for it. They kept their children away from him, and he didn't have any friends growing up. He was a right nuisance, pulling pranks all the time, but who could blame the kid? He didn't really connect with anyone until the night of his graduation. Most people regarded him with contempt, and those few families that knew the truth couldn't get close to him. I know I have no excuse. I should have watched him better, sensei. At the apologetic tone in the man's voice, Minato raised an elegant eyebrow. Are you apologizing for not being there for my son, Kakashi? For allowing others to treat him as a villain, and not a hero? He asked sharply, making his student wince. Basically, yes. He owed it to his sensei to be direct. I'm sorry, sensei. I failed you. A heavy silence enveloped the two. Kakashi stared at his teacher nervously, while Minato looked back at him, a critical look in his eyes. Finally, the latter sighed and shrugged. We'll discuss this later. Right now, please continue your story. You were at the eve of his graduation? Apologies could wait for later. Right then, Minato just wanted to hear about his son. Only somewhat assuaged, Kakashi nodded. That night was the first time he created a bond with someone other than the third. Ichinobu Mizuki, a Chunin instructor at the academy, tricked him into stealing your scroll of sealing. He had told Naruto that, if he learned a technique from that, he could graduate, but he was only trying to get his hands on the scroll for Orochimaru. He wasn't expecting Naruto to actually put up a fight, though. The kid went ahead and managed to learn the shadow clone jutsu. I know. Minato commented, smirking proudly. I know about his bond with Yumino Irika, too. I could sense what happened to him when his emotions were really high, Kakashi. That's so, Kakashi said, then sighed. After a few seconds he cleared his throat and continued. After that, he joined my genin team and, well, I'll let him tell you all that himself. At Minato's wide-eyed look, the Jounin just smiled. Finally, his sensei nodded and rolled his shoulders. The joints creaked stiffly. Very well. What else have I missed? You mentioned Orochimaru. Did he finally defect from Konoha? He asked sharply, piercing eyes watching his student closely. The subject elicited a sigh from Kakashi. He went rogue about 6 years after your death. The third was finally going to apprehend him and hand him to the interrogation department when he scarpered. He'd been practicing kinjutsu, trying to make himself into an immortal. Mitarashi Enko can tell you more about him. She was his student when he left. In addition, he developed the curse seal while still working for Konoha. Upon being burned into the user's skin, the user can phase into a different form with a stronger chakra system. Enko has one she'd barely survived. If you're that interested, you should look at it. He added, noticing Minato's attention perking up at the word seal. Now, about 3.5 years ago, Orochimaru infiltrated the Chunin exams being held in Konoha by impersonating the 4th Kazekage. He was after Uchiha Sasuke, the last of the Uchiha in Konoha and Naruto's teammate. I know about Sasuke too. Carry on. Minato interrupted him again, making him sigh. Sensei, you really shouldn't interrupt people. He complained, causing his teacher to smirk slightly. In any case, when he was exposed, he attacked Konoha for all he was worth. Hiruzen-sama managed to seal his arms away by using the Shiki Fuin. Minato's eyes widened dramatically at that, and his breath caught in his chest. Kakashi wished he could do something to ease the pain clearly etched on his sensei's face, but there was nothing he could do but pause respectfully. I take it you didn't know. I'm sorry, I should have phrased it better. No, I need to hear all this, and we don't have time for pussyfooting. Minato replied, composing himself again. His voice returned to its Hokage timbre instinctively, making Kakashi wonder if he was even aware of his mission leader tone. Inoichi mentioned the fifth Hokage. Since the title of fourth had already been given out, that means that there was one more Hokage. Who succeeded Hiruzen? Tsunade. Kakashi replied calmly, noting his sensei's surprise. Jiraiya's old teammate? He asked. She had never wanted to return to Konoha, much less become its Hokage. After the third's death, Jiraiya thought of her. He took Naruto to find her. You'll find that your son has a very charismatic personality. He seems able to convince people to believe in him and themselves. Why, he even convinced the Sans Jinchuriki to stop seeing himself as a killing machine. The last comment was a bone Kakashi thought Minato really needed. His sensei's proud look was a satisfying reward. What's her condition? Minato asked instead of commenting, though he really wanted to drop everything and just hear about his son. Sharp eyes noted the way his student's body turned more towards him. Is Konoha going to lose another Hokage? He demanded. Not exactly. Calm down and listen. Kakashi chided, again taking Minato by surprise. Sometimes I wonder if Naruto did take after you, as well, sensei. The comment made them both smile slightly, easing the tension in the air. Currently, Tsunade-sama is in a deep coma. During the fight against the six paths of pain, she released her jutsu in order to save as many as she could. The chakra exhaustion coupled together with how taxing it is to control and distribute such amounts of healing chakra has sent her into it. Shizen and Sakura, the kunoichi that came to fetch Naruto earlier, report that her condition is stable, but are unsure as to when or even if she will wake up again. So the village is without a leader right now, Minato mused, stroking his chin thoughtfully. What of the council and the daimyo? The situation must be troubling them deeply. Currently, the council is leading in Tsunade's stead. However, you are correct in assuming neither of them will simply wait. The vague prognosis has the council already pushing for Tsunade's dismissal. They wish to appoint a new Hokage as soon as possible, one that will be able to lead Konoha in these difficult times of instability and potential war. In response to his student's flat, irritated tone, Minato narrowed his eyes. And who's the primary candidate for the new position? He asked, though he already had a gut feeling. Danzo. The copy means one uncovered gray eye studied how his sensei's face clamped in irritation and dislike. Clearly, the former Hokage had had enough contact with Danzo to know what the man was like. I assure you, I like him just as much. He commented dryly. That man cannot become Hokage. Minato exclaimed, surprising Kakashi with the force of his outburst. Konoha needs someone to lead her towards peace, not martial law. The man has no respect for the will of fire. There's a reason Hiruzen was selected in the first place. Shikaka wanted to nominate me. Kakashi added flatly, watching his teacher's expression turn from outrage to surprise to calm. Figures that the Nara wouldn't accept such a position himself. In any case, you might need a little polishing, but you would make a goo. I declined. Kakashi interrupted him, leaving the man speechless. Inwardly, the Jounin took a little satisfaction out of that. It wasn't often that his calm, collected teacher was shocked enough to have no response. You declined? He repeated after a few heartbeats, eyeing his student critically. You would rather let Danzo take the hat? No, sensei, I would not. Kakashi replied calmly, starting to walk around again so that Minato wouldn't be able to see his face. If there is one thing you taught me, it's to always think of the good of the village. Which is why I declined. It would be pointless for me to accept the nomination when we have another candidate far better suited. In fact, one would say he had experience with the position of a Kage. Having realized where Kakashi was leading the conversation, Minato sighed and ran a hand through his hair. I've been dead for 16 years, Kakashi. No matter if I was willing to lead the village wouldn't accept me back that easily. Minato remarked, the bitter but pragmatic undertone clear. And even if they would, I'm not certain I'm the best for the position any longer. Surely in 16 years a shinobi more skilled than myself must have appeared, once that's more up to date with current events. He or she would be the best candidate. At that, Kakashi shook his head. Sensei, you underestimate yourself. That's quite unlike you. You are as fit a candidate for the title of Hokage as anyone would be. Yes, you're not caught up to current events fully yet, but that can be easily and quickly remedied. Didn't they call you a genius for a reason? Don't give me that look now. I'm not a good leader, sensei. I wouldn't make a good Hokage. You, on the other hand, were what the village needed. You inspired everyone, you guided them. That's what Konoha needs now. The village needs a leader to guide them through this mess. A leader that carries the will of fire, not the militant spirit that Danzo has. Don't tell me that death left you devoid of your dreams, sensei. It was your dream to become Hokage, to protect the village. You proved yourself worthy when you sacrificed your life for it. Are you really going to turn your back on your village now, when it needs you the most? A heavy silence hung between the two following Kakashi's little speech. Minato had hung his head, accepting his student's admonishment quietly. For a moment, Kakashi wondered if he had gone too far. He kept forgetting his sensei had much to catch up on, and how overwhelming it must be to have woken up in a different time. He hadn't even expected to end up lecturing his sensei. His disquietude was proven unnecessary, however, when Minato looked up at him, fire burning in his azure eyes and mouth pressed in a determined line. "You're right, Kakashi, though that has to be the longest I have ever heard you preach. Even longer than you used to chastise Obito." He smiled faintly. Kakashi relaxed and smiled sheepishly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Sorry, Minato-sensei. But you needed to hear it." Turning serious once more, the Jounin slipped his hands inside his pockets. "The council and Danzo won't react to you with open arms, however." "I know," came the simple reply. "Leave the council and daimyo to me. I believe I can handle them. All that remains is to begin to tactfully leak the information that I'm alive again." He murmured thoughtfully, stroking his chin. "Taken care of." Kakashi interrupted his train of thought, making his teacher lock up in surprise. "Taken care of?" he echoed. At that moment, the tent flap was pulled back and Naruto Shikaka stepped into the tent, looking at Kakashi. "The rumors are spreading," he stated, glancing from one to the other. "Many are repeating that the fourth Hokage is back from the dead, that once again, he's fighting to protect the leaf from the Kyuubi and that he's here to take on his role as Hokage again." He added, noting how Minato's eyes narrowed slightly. It really amused the Nara to see his former calm Hokage taken aback as he was. The blonde glanced from one to the other and put two and two together as only he could. "You used Naruto, didn't you? You bet on the fact that he would blurt out information like that, and that the people would trust him." Both were statements, not questions. Kakashi gave his teacher a sheepish smile, but relaxed at the approving look Minato was giving them both. "All right. It seems the rumors are spreading. They need to be reinforced swiftly and positively, before anyone has the chance to crush them." "You're planning to do this, then, Minato?" Shikaku checked, raising an eyebrow. "You plan on becoming Hokage again?" Minato's smile was small, but genuine. "Yes, I do. However, I'm not certain if it'll be harder or easier this time round," he commented lightly. Both Kakashi and Shikaku nodded in satisfaction, returning to the more pressing matters. "Are you able to stand?" the Nara asked him, trying to evaluate his physical condition. "The easiest and best way would be for you to use the Haration. But for that, we need a good setting and you to still be standing after you use the technique." Minato was already nodding in agreement. "After a night's rest and food, my body seems more responsive to me. My chakra network is still depleted, however, and my reflexes aren't as they were before. I believe I can stand and, with a day or two of training, I'll be able to produce the Haration. To do that, however, I'll need sealing paper and kunai. I don't suppose there's anything left of my weapon storage, is there?" he asked pensively, turning to Kakashi. The silver-haired Jounin shook his head. "The third had them destroyed just in case spies tried to copy your seals. I have a blacksmith I can trust, however. He can produce enough kunai for you if you draw up the design for him. That's easy enough to do. I'll need sealing paper and ink to create the seals for them, as well. I might as well do these today if we're to train tomorrow." Gradually, the former Hokage had been beginning to talk to himself, almost as he planned their next moves. No matter how distracted he was, however, he couldn't miss the smirk under Kakashi's mask. "What? I look forward to training with you again, sensei," he said lightly, in a tone that made Minato groan inwardly. He had a feeling tomorrow would be challenging, to say the least. Though the night sky is clear of clouds, the bright stars above are shrouded, masked by a thick smog of ash and hate. Glowing chakra tendrils lick at the dense clouds choking the air, illuminating them almost like claps of thunder tearing through the sky. The night's peace is broken abruptly, pleasant voices turning into screams, laughter giving way to tears, content replaced with terror. Many grand buildings in the village are reduced rubble in instants, debris blasted about. The ash, the falling rubble, the ungodly chakra glow set the scene for one of the worst nights the Hidden Leaf has ever seen. The nine-tailed fox is loose. Resistance is futile, as people are wont to say. Paper bombs explode against the demon's hide, only serving to infuriate the fox further. Despite the hopelessness of the situation, Konoha's shinobi still fight on, still try to buy time for the civilians to get out, for their leader to arrive. Surely, he couldn't still be far? His point of view changes. Now, he's facing the beast from a great distance, the wind blowing his hair about. He feels sick to his stomach, almost to the point of retching. He knows how the scene will unfold, but nevertheless, he cannot stop his hands from weaving the seals. He knows, yet he cannot stop it. A giant toad appears, slamming into the beast and trapping it under him. Over the roar of the fox and the crackling of the fires spreading throughout his village, he can hear voices calling his name. They sound relieved. If only they knew what would happen that night. For an instant, he meets his predecessor's eyes. He wants to shout out to him, to warn him, but his mouth won't move. Against his will, his hands are weaving seals again, taking the fox away from the village. He goes with it. No! He thinks desperately as they arrive, or rather make, a clearing in the surrounding forest. I don't want to see this again. As he fetches his wife and child, he cries on the inside, because once more, he will see the woman he loves die. Try as he might, he still has no control over his body. The words pouring out of his mouth are not his own. He never wants to suggest sacrifice to her again. He doesn't want to accept her death. As he prepares the ceremonial altar, he is already mourning his losses, knowing the course of history, yet unable to prevent him. Fate is such a fickle whore. The Shinigami is summoned. He almost throws up again when he sees that otherworldly face again. No, he doesn't want to see this again. Kushina. She's coughing up blood and he runs to her, desperately holding on to her for as long as he can. He hasn't seen her in so long, and he'll never see her again. Like water, she's slipping away from him, trickling through his fingers. Laughter reaches his ears, startling him. He doesn't remember laughter. Both he and his love spin around to see the masked man returned, holding their newborn son in his arms, pried from the altar's embrace. No! Slips past both their lips. His body is growing numb, heavy, but he rises to his feet, charges towards him. More laughter. A sudden blow has him flying to the side, rolling on the stony ground. He can taste blood. The fox, Tomo move in Sharingan eyes as the Kyuubi glares at him, its hate rolling over him in stifling waves. This time, he does retch, but his stomach holds nothing to relinquish. His love screams as the fox strikes at her with sharp claws, yet his body will move no longer. He strains every fiber in his being, but he can no longer move, no longer scream. The masked man gazes at him steadily, raising a kunai in triumph. As the Kyuubi prepares to end his life as well, the man plunges the dagger into his crying, newborn son, cutting the thread that. Back in the tent, Namikaze's Minato woke up, drenched in a cold sweat. For several long seconds, he blinked up at the canvas above him with unseeing eyes. Blood danced in front of his eyes, blood mixed with ash and crimson chakra. Then, with another blink, it was all gone. A dull ache in his chest reminded him to breathe, soon gasping quietly while he waited for his heartbeat to slow down. Belatedly, he realized there were tears drying on his cheeks. A soft groan escaped his lips, but it didn't wake Naruto, thankfully. The former Hokage turned to gaze at his sleeping son, a bittersweet smile tugging at his lips at the way he was sprawled across the futon, covers almost completely thrown off. His panic and fear only really left him when he looked at Naruto, hearing his loud snoring, assuring himself that he was there, he was alive and safe. Though he never expected to fall asleep again, the adrenaline soon wore off and the blonde fell asleep, curled up on his side towards his son. You're too slow, sensei. A genin could dodge that. There are many ways to get a point across. Kakashi, never fond of pussyfooting around or sugarcoating anything, preferred a more direct approach to things, fact which sometimes made him come across as rude or aloof. He was rather famous for it. In his sensei's case, however, the jounin simply liked to tease the man he had come to know since his early days. Is that so? Minato panted in reply, wiping the sweat from his forehead with a blue sleeve and grinning. The two had elected to spar in their ninja suits, one bright blue, the other black. Sweat was coating their bodies, though only the blonde was panting. They had been sparring for half an hour now, beginning with taijutsu as a warm-up. Though his body was still stiff and muscles somewhat sore, Minato could stand and move with greater ease than the previous night. To his and Kakashi's great relief, his body hadn't deteriorated with death, just needed to ease the kinks out. Hey, Dad! Kick his butt! Naruto called from the edge of the clearing, drawing both jounin's gazes to him. The young ninja grinned at his father, a happy smile in place. Beside him, Sakura just smiled, not allowing herself to become distracted. She was there as a precaution just in case medical attention was needed. How can I ignore a request like that? Minato mused teasingly, azure eyes sparkling as he shot his son a cheeky grin. Turning back towards his student, his face changed into a look of pure concentration Kakashi recognized from their days on the same team. Instinctively, he moved into a more defensive position. He wanted no sudden surprises. If he hadn't had the Sharingan out, he would have gotten one. His keepsake from Obito managed to register his opponent's movement just in time for him to throw his body out of the way, parrying the blow to his stomach as his sensei flashed past him, skidding to a stop and attacking again. The second assault he couldn't stop and felt a hand slam into his stomach, but Minato was gone before he managed to strike him back. Fast enough for you? Minato called from 10 feet away, a teasing smirk on his face. He was still panting and, if Sakura looked closely, she thought she could see his body shaking. The kunoichi's green eyes narrowed slightly, sensing for the moment to intervene. Kakashi looked back at him coolly, unimpressed. Not bad, sensei. Now, if you could manage to hit harder than a schoolgirl, I might start considering you as more of a threat. Minato chuckled at that, lowering his center of gravity and preparing for the next time they would connect. Reading Kakashi's movements, he was ready to shoot forward and meet him, connecting. Kakashi aimed a series of punches towards his torso and head, all of which his teacher parried instinctively. When he managed to brush Kakashi to the side after a thrust towards his shoulder, Minato prepared to land a knee in the middle of his back, but was foiled when his former student twisted around and barred it with his own leg. Breaking apart for only a moment, the two weaved together, flowing through stances and styles as they adapted to the other's pattern and tried to get ahead. Within minutes, Minato was barely receiving enough air in his lungs to continue, His pants were growing shallower and harsher. Losing concentration for a moment, Kakashi managed to land a hit on his chest, sending him stumbling backwards. Perhaps he would have even fallen over had he not reached and grabbed him by the shoulder. A groan came from Naruto, but both Jounin ignored it. "Sensei?" Kakashi asked calmly, looking the man over for injuries. Minato flashed him a sheepish, reassuring smile as he recovered his balance, brushing his hand off. The sweat was glistening on his face, body shaking slightly, but Kakashi focused more on his breathing. "I'm fine, Kakashi." Minato cut into his evaluation. "I simply became short of breath." "How does a short break sound? Then we move into more interesting waters," he added, eyes twinkling. Over the past 1.5 days, his chakra system had recovered to a degree he found quite adequate. Shizen had been against him practicing ninjutsu yet, but he knew his own limits. Currently, like his body, his chakra coils felt as if they were screaming for use. The former Hokage was convinced some practice would do him good. "Dad, you've definitely gotta beat him, you know," Naruto whispered to him as soon as he sat down, taking a sip of water. The knucklehead was gazing at his father intensely, fists clenched in front of his chest. "Don't worry, Naruto. I've got a few tricks still up my sleeve," he whispered back. Glancing up at Kakashi, he felt a smirk tug at his lips. "Just watch carefully, okay?" Naruto nodded, looking quite excited. Suddenly, Minato was struck by a memory from the previous night. Naruto, helpless in the masked man's arms as the kunai plunged into his soft body. "You got it!" Naruto's voice broke through the mini flashback, making Minato blink at him in disorientation for a few moments. At his son's expectant look, he smiled sheepishly again and nodded, pushing the nightmare out of his mind. "Shall we continue then, Kakashi-chan?" Minato called, rising to his feet and smiling at his former student as if he were far younger than he was. If Kakashi noticed something strange in his teacher's demeanor, he didn't let on. His expression remained unimpressed, hands in his pockets. However, his Sharingan was still uncovered, proof that the man wasn't underestimating his opponent. "Only if you don't lose your breath again, Minato-sensei," he answered back in a bored voice, eyes scanning the other man from head to toe. He was pleased to note he had caught his breath back and seemed more fluid in moving. Today's spar had been a good idea after all. Inwardly, he was apprehensions about moving on into ninjutsu, but he had long learned to trust his sensei's judgment. "Shall we begin, then?" he asked, removing his hands from the cloth pouches. Minato's smile brightened slightly. "Kakashi, we already have," he said cheerfully, then vanished in a puff of smoke. Kakashi's eyes widened minutely before he jumped to the side, avoiding a volley of kunai. He was taken aback to see that they were all tripe-wrong. "Clones," he thought as they disappeared, glancing around him. Again, he had to jump to the side to avoid a barrage of shuriken, deflecting most of them with a kunai. "You'll have to do better than that, sensei." A gust of wind. The Hitaki's sharp nose caught wind of his sensei's familiar scent towards his 6 o'clock, where he'd moved after the final volley of shuriken. Crouching low, he shot towards the tree, hands forming seals rapidly. "Suetun, Teppadama!" Water gathered in his mouth and shot up towards his sensei, blasting a sizable hole in the tree trunk. Minato had to move to avoid it, kicking off from the branch and moving right towards him. The two were headed on a collision course when Kakashi broke apart, soaking Minato in water. A water clone, the former Hokage thought, body bursting apart in a puff of smoke as a kunai embedded itself into his back. "Whoa!" Naruto exclaimed, eyes straining to follow the rapid movements. "They're fast." The small clearing they were in was now empty, only the damaged tree showing any signs of ninja activity. "You should really have expected nothing less, Naruto." Sakura chided him lightly, but she herself was surprised. She hadn't seen her sensei fighting like that in several years, and the two opponents were magnificent at dancing around each other. This would be a match to remember. "One body, 30 feet to my left." It was a handy trick, being able to find your enemies by feeling their chakra through the ground. Minato had found it serving him well, especially during the Third Shinobi War. Back then, he would use it to note how many opponents he was facing so that he could use the Hiraishin appropriately. Facing Kakashi, however, he knew that he knew he could find him. And he knew Kakashi knew that he knew he could find him by scent. Knowing made their little game of cat and mouse that much more interesting. As the figure to his left closed in on him, he held his sensory technique as long as he could afford to, sensing a second figure just entering the field of his divination just as he connected with the first Kakashi. Down to taijutsu again, the two traded punches and kicks for a few seconds before Minato disengaged abruptly, barely dodging a fireball. "I need to stay out of taijutsu as much as I can. My body isn't at its finest," he thought, brows furrowed in concentration. As he was standing on a tree, he was forced to run down it in a spiral, dodging a hail of kunai. He was smiling as he jumped to the next tree, exhilarated to really move his body again. He knew Kakashi was a strong opponent, one that knew all his tricks, while he missed out on seeing his student grow for the past 16 years. He was at a disadvantage. That only made him smile wider. He liked disadvantages. "Will you keep dodging for the remainder of the training session?" Kakashi called up to him, eyebrow raised. Or are you just assessing my level? You're too predictable. Sin he was cut off as a large, swirling ball of chakra hit him from beneath, Minato breaking free of the ground he was standing on. The Rasengan hit him in the chest, throwing his body several feet away before it disappeared. With a grin, the clone Minato had employed also disappeared, leaving him alone once more. Now who's hiding, Kakashi? He called, then vanished. Suetun, Suryuden. The jutsu was called in a low voice, but the silver-haired Jounin's enhanced hearing picked it up. The crashing of the water dragon's body against trees was enough to give it away, in any case. The copy-nin smirked to himself, leaping from tree branch to tree branch as he evaded the water serpent. That's a jutsu I copied from you, sensei. It won't take me down so easily. He taunted the forest around him, weaving seals as he moved. Raitun, Sanda Saburu. He called as he jumped off a tree, flying straight towards the oncoming dragon. A lightning field shield appeared in front of him, slamming into the dragon and coursing electricity through its body. The serpent was released upon impact, showering Kakashi with a heavy body of water that plastered his hair against his face and neck as he alighted on the muddy forest floor. Just as he landed, his eyes widened as he came face to face with a seal, stuck on a tree trunk in front of him. As the chakra-receptive paper ignited, the copy-nin had just enough time to leap back before the explosive tag went off, knocking him against a tree trunk. Upon impact, Kakashi's body was replaced by a fallen tree branch. Minato chuckled softly at the Kawarini, eyes narrowing suddenly. Much like he had done on the night of the Kyuubi's attack, he spun around, grabbing Kakashi's arm as he struck at him with the blunt side of a kunai. For a heartbeat, the two spun around each other, backs almost touching. Kakashi felt his sensei's long, blonde hair just brush his cheek in passing before they let go of each other, shooting off in opposite directions. To catch a master, you have to be one yourself, Kakashi. Minato chided teasingly as he landed on one foot and pivoted, arm rising. A swirling ball of chakra appeared in his hand, though much smaller than the one he usually applied. Kakashi had likewise spun around, charging at his sensei with a crackling orb of lightning in his open palm, also modest in size. The two were set on a collision course when Kakashi suddenly dived, slamming his Chidori into the ground mere feet away from his teacher. An enormous cloud of dust billowed into existence, obscuring Minato's vision momentarily. Releasing his Rasengan, the blonde leaped upwards towards the safety of a higher perch, only to have his ankle caught in a vice-like grip. With a strong pull, he came crashing to the ground, kicking out to free himself and rolling quickly. He couldn't see Kakashi, but he could hear him as he closed the small distance between them fast. Futon Sensugahiki, he called, a wall of wind rising up in front of him just in time to push Kakashi back. The few seconds he bought were enough for Minato to leap to his feet, avoiding the attack Kakashi had aimed at his previous spot. The wall of wind had dissipated the cloud of dust, leaving the two shinobi face to face once more. Minato was panting again, but still grinning. His eyes widened suddenly when a voice came out from behind him. The master is the one who makes the final move, sensei, Kakashi said in a flat voice. Chidori, do you think they're alright? Man, I wish we could see what they were doing, Naruto grumbled, fidgeting where he sat next to Sakura. We haven't seen anything for over half an hour. Hush, Naruto, Sakura replied, sighing. Naruto's negligible attention span left him easily bored, and she was the one who usually suffered because of it. It wouldn't be a real fight if they stayed inside the clearing, just throwing things at each other. We're talking about Kakashi-sensei here. He'll hide and attack from behind. I don't know how Yandeme-sama fights, but he'll be forced to take Kakashi-sensei's style into account. Just be patient. We'll see them back soon. Despite her words, Sakura was growing bored herself. She wasn't worried per se. She knew the two men were skilled enough to avoid killing each other. However, sitting on a damp patch of grass for half an hour babysitting an impatient Naruto was taxing, to say the least. An explosion made them both jump to their feet, looking around with keen eyes. They could expect anything from a shower of pointy metal death to an enemy attack. Their fears were assuaged, however, when the two sparring jounin reappeared in the clearing, running parallel to each other. Futon Juhasho, Minato called, weaving seals faster than Naruto could see. Almost like a scythe, a crescent moon-shaped wave of wind tore over the grass towards Kakashi, cutting down any vegetation in its way. Raitun Jibashi. Having read his sensei's seals with his Sharingan, Kakashi was already prepared for the oncoming attack. He weaved his seals simultaneously, calling forth a current of electricity that slammed into the wind scythe, causing yet another explosion. Instead of shying away from it, both shinobi leaped over it, kunai drawn. Shuriken, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Minato called, sending a shower of thousands of the ninja stars raining down on Kakashi. Naruto yelped as several embedded themselves into the dirt mere inches from his foot, crawling away on his behind. Sakura gasped as Kakashi was struck down, able to evade only so many shuriken. Minato appeared concerned as he landed, shaking his head as the body disappeared, replaced by a log. Of course, the Kawarimi. He smiled to himself, looking up ahead of him. I suppose you win this round, don't you, Kakashi? You're good, sensei, but I've had time. Kakashi replied from where he was standing behind him, kunai point a centimeter away from the base of the blonde's neck. 16 years, to be precise. You have, haven't you? Minato replied calmly, still smiling. At the turn of events, Naruto couldn't help but feel disappointed. He'd so wanted to see the yellow flash in action, kicking his senseis, but he guessed his father had yet to recover properly. Can't be helped. He sighed to himself, getting to his feet with a pout. My taijutsu needs some work. Minato continued conversationally. Most of the stiffness is gone now, but another day of movement will really do wonders. You've improved, by the way. What about your chakra control? Kakashi asked back. Your ninjutsu was fine up until that final futon. The scythe wasn't nearly as powerful as it usually was. Are you running low on chakra? He inquired, somewhat concerned. After all, their purpose was to build up his strength, not exhausted him once more. Minato's light chuckle set alarm bells ringing faintly, but he couldn't figure out why. No, not really, he replied, still facing forward. My chakra is mostly recovered. I was saving it up for one last jutsu, however, which is why the scythe was so easy to halt. You wanted to drag the battle out longer then? Kakashi asked incredulously. With all due respect, sensei, you just returned. Your ninjutsu might be up to your normal standards, but your body still needs time. You were never one to rush things, he remarked critically, causing Minato to laugh sheepishly. I didn't wish to drag the battle out, per se, he smiled. Rather, I was waiting for this. Kakashi barely had time to blink before he felt a sudden electrical surge beside him, the small gust of displaced air as his sensei's real body materialized next to him, kunai at his throat. Minato was panting slightly, but his grin spoke volumes, intensified only by his student's surprised look. Whoa! Did you see that, Sakura-chan? Naruto called, jumping to his feet. He just suddenly got there. Sakura nodded in amazement, looking around them to find where he must have been hiding. She had never seen anyone move so fast, not even Kakashi, so she supposed she must have just witnessed the fourth's legendary Hiraishin. All the kunoichi could do was blink in awe. Since when? Kakashi asked in a low voice, lowering his kunai. He seemed subdued, gray eyes emotionless, as he lowered his hideate over his Sharingan. Minato smiled indulgently, gathering his weapons, the taijutsu spar. He answered the unfinished question, wiping the sweat from his forehead. I removed myself from the battle about 10 minutes ago, waiting. It almost saddens me you didn't notice, Kakashi-chan. Almost. We'll see if you're still smiling tomorrow, Minato-sensei. Kakashi replied, the two shinobi staring each other down. Minato just chuckled and turned. For now, the title of master is still mine. I can't say I'm not satisfied with that. As he was returning to Naruto's side, he noticed his son was gazing at him with wide eyes. Dad, that was awesome. Can you teach me it, haha? Naruto gushed, eyes filled with excitement. Minato laughed again, rubbing the back of his head. When we have time, I can certainly try, Naruto. I can't promise you anything though, your mother was rotten at it. As he had done back in the White Plain, Minato placed a hand on his son's head, ruffling his hair. Naruto looked at him with puzzled eyes, making his smile even more bittersweet. It pained him how little he had bonded with his son. His little boy was already 16, and looked at him as if he were a new sensei, not a father. Briefly, he wondered if they had run out of time, if this miraculous second chance would be in vain. Just wait and see, Dad. His son interrupted his train of thought, making him cock his head to the side. You better be careful, or I'll be Hokage in your stead. Naruto grinned, his eyes set in determination. Suddenly, Minato had the sensation of standing by Kushina, the two staring into a mirror together. Naruto was him, and he was Kushina, and he was Jiraiya and Kakashi. Most importantly, he was his son. He deserved every effort Minato could make. Kawarimi, replacement jutsu. Shuriken Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Shuriken Shadow Clone Jutsu. Suetun, Suryuden, Water Style, Water Dragon. Raitun, Sanda Saburo, Lightning Style, Thunder Saber. Futon Sensugahiki, Wind Style, Rumbling Wind Wall. Suetun, Tapadama, Water Style, Water Bullet. Raitun, Jibashi, Lightning Style, Electromagnetic Murder. Katon, Gakukui no Jutsu, Fire Style, Giant Fireball Jutsu. Futon, Juhasho, Wind Style, Beast Wave Strike. Naruto was happy. Mind-numbingly, ridiculously, overwhelmingly, blissfully happy. The sun was warm on his face, a gentle breeze ruffling his hair as he lay back on the cool grass, blue eyes blinking up at the canopy of leaves above his head. Beside him, he could feel his father, the source of his happiness, breathing soundly. Every now and then, he opened his mouth to say anything, but no sound would come out. Despite how happy he was at finally having his father there, at being able to look at him, touch him, talk to him, he was tongue-tied at the mere thought of talking to him. It was stupid, the young ninja thought. Only yesterday, he had been more than happy to talk to him. The day before, he had practically tackled the man to the ground. The sudden onslaught of shyness and embarrassment was annoying him to no end, but he couldn't find a single way to start the conversation. The two had been lying in the late afternoon sunshine for about 15 minutes now. After their training session, Minato had promptly laid back down on the grass, informing Kakashi that he would return to the tent later. He briefly looked at Naruto with a soft smile, a signal. Kakashi and Sakura had seemed to understand and left the two alone in the clearing, though Sakura looked like she wanted to say something to Naruto. The latter had sat down on the grass, grinning awkwardly at first. He waited for his father to catch his breath after the spar, almost shaking with anticipation, but he soon began to feel disappointed when his father kept his silence. Is this as awkward for him, too? The blonde sighed inwardly, turning to glance at his father. He was surprised when he saw azure eyes looking at him, a soft smile on the other man's face. I'm sorry about keeping you waiting, Naruto. Minato smiled that friendly, warm smile of his, and Naruto felt a slight blush tint his cheeks. The slightly breathless quality to his voice hinted that he'd just been resting, after all. It's okay, the youth mumbled, sitting up. Minato mirrored the gesture, albeit stiffly, so that they would remain eye to eye. Idly, he rested one elbow on his bent knee. I'm sorry this is awkward, Naruto, he said slowly, taking his son by surprise. Their eyes met, and Naruto was startled to see sorrow mixed in his father's irises. I wish you didn't have reason to feel awkward. I wish you had grown up with parents to talk to and to look over you, that you hadn't been so lonely. Minato's voice was low and brutally honest, apologetic. His shoulders were stiff, as if he was bracing himself subconsciously. On the one hand, I wish, save it, Dad? Naruto interrupted him, his voice emotional and somewhat wobbly. Like I said, I can deal, because I'm the fourth Hokage's son. The statement brought a bittersweet smile to Minato's face, who smiled despite the emotions on his face. Even he, famed for keeping his composure at all times, couldn't fight the emotions welling up in him. I see Kakashi taught you how to interrupt people, he said softly, bringing a slight smile to Naruto's lips. Like I was saying, I wish you had had an easier life, a better childhood. However, I'm not sorry for the choice we made. I'm sorry you grew up without us, Naruto, but even back then, I knew I could trust you to deal. I know it's no excuse, and I'm a horrible parent for abandoning my child. I can understand it if you hate me for what I did. As he talked, Minato's voice was slowly losing its calm tone, turning more emotional and anxious as the words flowed. 16 years was a long time to hold emotions in, to let them fester, and if Minato had done something, it was let pain fester, regret, guilt. I'm here now though, and if you can forgive my selfishness, Dad, stop. Naruto interrupted him again, ignoring his father's startled expression. His eyes were hard, stern as he gazed at his parent and hero. A fist was clenched on his knee, trembling slightly. If you regretted your choice, you wouldn't be the fourth Hokage, Konoha's hero. You'd be scum that didn't deserve the name of Hokage. A Hokage's job is to protect the village at any cost, after all. What you did wasn't selfish. You gave your life for the sake of the village. You've been my hero ever since I was a kid. I wanted to live up to your legacy, to be a hero like you. Minato managed to choke out, overwhelmed by his son's words. Sitting before him and looking at him with fierce, serious eyes, he was strongly reminded of the youth. No, young man, he watched talking with pain, talking about peace and hatred. Kushina, this is our son, he thought to himself, a lump rising in his throat. When I was a kid, everyone hated me. They stayed away from me and called me a monster. I didn't know why. I hated it. I just wanted someone to acknowledge me, to be a happier person because I was there. Naruto mumbled softly, looking down at the grass. He'd lost the fierce look, eyes brimming with sorrow. I know. Minato replied softly, wanting to touch him too much but hesitating. I'm sorry you had to suffer like that, Naruto. I wanted you to be a hero, but I guess people fear and hate what they don't know. It's okay, Dad, I worked really hard. I tried and in the end I managed it. I made friends, comrades I can trust with my life. I could do it, because I'm Naruto, the gutsy ninja who never gives up. Father and son paused for a moment, thinking of the man they had both held so dear. I had to be strong, but I don't hate you for it, I just wish you'd been there. Naruto, you? Minato breathed softly, looking at his son with wide eyes. Naruto looked up and grinned sheepishly at his father's dumbstruck expression. He was about to say something silly to lighten the mood when his father moved, hugging him. The motion left the young man speechless, shocked. Minato felt him stiffen in his arms, but he didn't withdraw. He'd needed this contact for too long to be able to let it go now. I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. I promise you that. After a second stunned pause, Naruto hugged his father back, the two silent. Then, Minato let go, sitting back on the grass and looking up at the waving leaves above his head, a peaceful smile on his face. His face appeared utterly serene, relieved, as if a great weight had left his chest. Naruto blinked at him for a few moments before smiling and lying back down on the grass. He half mumbled, words coming even harder when his father's calm, curious eyes turned to look at him again. You mentioned Mom earlier, did she try to learn the Hiraishin? Who was she? What was she like? The hesitant questions obviously hid great interest behind them, but the subject made Minato smile sadly. With a slight grunt, he lay back on the grass beside his son, arms folded under his head. Naruto turned onto his side, watching his father intently. Your mother was called Uzumaki Kushina. He began in a soft voice, azure eyes blinking up at the leaves. Naruto's eyes widened slightly at the sound of his mother's name, fact which brought a bittersweet smile to Minato's face. The third gave you her surname in order to protect you from my enemies, Naruto. If IWA heard of a Namikaze in Konoha, you would have been targeted for more reasons than what is sealed inside of you. I didn't want to give you another reason to be a high-profile target. At that, the man sighed, but didn't let himself dwell on it. Your mother was the stubbornest, loudest and most wonderful woman I have ever met, he added, grinning slightly when he turned to Naruto. Kakashi tells me you take after her to a remarkable degree. I do? Naruto asked, blinking. His expression made the fourth smile widen. From what I've seen of you, yes. Kushina was a very strong person. She would always speak her mind, no matter what the social situation or whom she was addressing. She was reckless and she would do everything she could to protect those she loved. The faraway look in his father's eyes, the slightly sad undertone to his voice made Naruto stay silent for a moment, giving his father a little personal time. His father's sudden chuckle startled him somewhat. When I first showed her the Horatian, her first reaction was identical to yours. Teach me, she demanded. She looked adorable, what with the way she was trying to look angry and unimpressed. I tried, but your mother just couldn't get the hang of it. It wasn't really her style of ninjutsu. After a while, she stopped trying and declared she would be Hokage in her own way. Mom wanted to be Hokage? Naruto asked, eyes widening slightly. Minato chuckled again faintly. When she first came to Konoha, she was teased by our classmates for her fiery red hair. And then she went ahead and proclaimed she would be the village's first female Hokage, so that everyone would accept her. He reminisced fondly. Of course, I had to tell her that I would be the one to become Hokage. He smirked slightly, raising Naruto's curiosity further. What did she say to that? She called me a sissy flake. Minato replied evenly, smirking more at his son's loud laughter. While Naruto laughed, the former Kage blinked up at the foliage above him, light filtering down to them. A pang of loss hit him hard and he closed his eyes, sending a small prayer up to his wife. You'd call me a flake now if you could, Kushina, he thought fondly, closing his eyes. I wish you were here. I miss you, he added simply, sighing. With everything happening, he hadn't had the chance to mourn his wife properly yet, his predecessor, his master. Once he was properly revealed to the villagers, he decided he would head to the cemetery and visit the memorial stone. He'd see Obito and Rin, too. Perhaps I should take Naruto and Kakashi, he thought to himself. When his eyes opened, he found Naruto looking at him, mixed emotions on his face. What? He asked, puzzled. Nothing. Naruto replied, and the two looked up at the leaves again. Another silence fell between the two, only warmer, more relaxed. Hey, Dad? Naruto began at length. What was the pervy sage like back when you were his student, Jiraiya-sensei? Minato chuckled. The same as he always was. I doubt he changed over the years. Always silly and loud, but he could be serious if he wanted to. I guess what stuck with me most was how irresponsible he was at times. Kept taking us to bars when we were 10 or 11. He grinned. Me too, me too. Naruto exclaimed vehemently. He told me about the 3 shinobi taboos, then went on to drink sake, be with women and spend all my hard-earned money. He left me to train all alone. His tone might have been annoyed, but it was obvious he was recalling the memory affectionately. Minato smiled at his son's little outburst, blinking up at the darkening sky serenely. He's the one who taught you the Rasengan, isn't he? Yeah. Naruto replied, grinning slightly. Wouldn't give me any tips, either, the old lecher. Tsunade Nobachan bet me the Shodame's necklace I couldn't master the final step in a week, but she lost. At the memory, he reached for the cord around his neck, only to remember it had broken when he had almost let out the Kyuubi, stopped only by his father's intervention. It pained him to know that the treasure had been lost, and he wasn't sure what he would tell Tsunade when she awoke. Aware of both the pause and the reason for it, Minato remained silent for a few moments, eyes following a sparrow as it searched for a perch for the night. What about Kakashi? What was he like as a teacher? He asked curiously. Kakashi-sensei? Naruto asked back, snorting. He was annoying as hell. We would always have to wait 3 hours for him because he was always late for appointments or missions. He would always read those pervy books pervy sage wrote, even when training us. He never paid attention and always favored Sasuke, he grumbled irritably, a sad pang hitting him at the last sentence. Now he understood why Kakashi had devoted most of his attention to Sasuke. During the tirade, Minato was smiling, nothing new to Naruto. He was becoming used to the man smiling nearly constantly. Although I guess he was a cool sensei, good masters produce good students. Minato replied quietly, both falling silent again. The loss of their sensei still weighed heavily on both their minds and hearts. Another silence fell over the two, the light around them starting to fade. The former Kage had noticed his son being less vociferous than usual but put it down to nerves. Well, awkwardness is only to be expected still. He thought to himself, smiling slightly. Let's hope that with some more time. Hey, Dad? Naruto interrupted, making the blonde turn to him. The young ninja's eyes were shining in the low light, his grin wide. What jutsu do you know? When can you try and teach me the Haraishin? Pervy Sage already taught me the Rasengan. He and Kakashi-sensei said you tried to combine it with your natural chakra but weren't able to finish it, but I did. If you teach me the Haraishin, I'll teach you the Rasen Shuriken. Gah, there's so much I want to ask you. Naruto burst out, all in one long breath. His chest was heaving softly, as if he'd finally gotten out something he'd been wanting to for ages, eyes sparkling softly. Minato had to blink at his son for several seconds before he laughed softly, smiling warmly and lovingly. I know you completed the Rasengan, Kakashi told me. I'm very proud of you, Naruto. As soon as we both have time, I really want to see it, though I probably won't be able to master it like you. And we can try the Haraishin, but it won't be effective unless you know Fuinjutsu. Sealing through special chakra paper and ink, he clarified at Naruto's blank expression. The user designs a seal made up out of elements in order to accomplish the desired effect. Did Jiraiya-sensei teach you any by any chance? Minato asked, voice light and content. There were few things he wanted more than to train together with his son, to share elements of their lives. I don't know, Naruto mumbled in reply, brows furrowed at the complicated things his father was talking about. He had me sign the Toad summoning contract, but I don't remember him teaching me anything with ink, he half muttered. Minato's smile didn't falter. We can start together, if you like, though it's up to you. Your mother didn't have much patience with Fuinjutsu, even if her clan was renowned for its sealing jutsu. He grinned. She preferred a more hands-on approach to things. The mirth on his father's face made Naruto grin again. Difficult jutsu matters already forgotten. Say, Dad, how did you and Mom meet? He grinned, eyes wide and expectant. Looking into those longing eyes almost made Minato cave, but he knew what was in his best interest, as well as what would be best for Naruto. That's not my place to tell you, actually. He smirked, noting Naruto's confused, then cheated expression. Yeah? But you're my dad. If you won't tell me, who will? He demanded. I want to know. If you won't tell me, who am I supposed to ask? He complained loudly, making Minato wince slightly, always smiling. You'll understand someday soon, I presume. Minato replied with a smile, sitting up. Foreseeing Naruto's vehement protests, the blonde decided to change the subject quickly. It's getting dark. We should return to the village before some patrol comes across us. Besides, I'm hungry. At that, Naruto's stomach gurgled, making the young ninja grin sheepishly. His father only smiled indulgently. When Naruto got up and dusted his pants down, he noticed his father had closed his eyes, a tired, yet concentrating look on his face. The blonde frowned and was about to interrupt when the fourth opened his eyes and smiled. All right. Kakashi did as I asked, so we should be fine. Hang on tight, Naruto. The man said mysteriously with a light smile, reaching for Naruto and taking him by the upper arm. The next thing Naruto knew, his body felt like it was being squeezed into juice, yet stretched to its breaking point. The world spun and flashed before his feet slammed into the dusty ground of their tent. He would have lost his balance if his father hadn't been holding onto him tightly. He felt sick. Whoa! Their return to the village took place in a heavy silence, the mood somber and depressed. The two teens hadn't said a word in hours, ever since they had crossed the border into the land of fire, and were safely behind friendly lines. Every step was heavy, every motion fluid and mechanical. Their eyes were misted over with grief and pain, hardly seeing the branches they were jumping over, the ground under their feet. Unlike them, their Jounin sensei had been on high alert until the moment they were behind allied forces, chakra-enhanced senses searching for even the slightest hint of an attack. He couldn't afford to lose his composure, not yet, at least. Team Minato was returning to Konoha one member short, when the silver-haired teen in front of him stumbled and plunged towards the ground. The blonde instructor shot after him, guiding him safely to the grassy path. Are you alright, Kakashi? He asked in a low voice, careful to avoid the boy's injured shoulder and face. He got no reply. Kakashi just jerked his hand out of his sensei's grip. Above in the branches, their third member, a young girl, watched on wordlessly. Kakashi the eldest tried again, but sighed quietly at the dead look in his student's eyes. The three continued onwards on the ground. Konohagakure wasn't more than an hour or two away. Just the thought of their home village made the three shinobi speed up the pace, each for his or her own reason. Every so often, the elder Jounin, for there were two in the group, would glance at his students, biting his lip worriedly. When the gates came into view, he almost used his unique teleportation jutsu to take them inside those cinnabar walls, where the two traveling with him would be safe. Almost. Of course, the gates were closed for the night, and he could sense the guards. The male teen, the front guard of the group, raised a hand unnecessarily to stop them as four Chunin-level ninja descended from the walls to intercept them. Before his student could act or speak rashly, the blonde stepped forwards, a hand in front of his temperamental student. Minato-sensei? The head of the guard platoon inquired hesitantly, hands already forming the alarm seal. These were times of war and security was tight, after all. It's me, Kikuko. Namikaze, Minato replied tiredly, his voice slightly hoarse and weary. The Chunin blinked at the returning four-man squad, not missing their loudest comrade's absence. By the blood on their clothes and their demeanor, the Chunin didn't want to ask. I'm sorry for being so blunt, but we're somewhat in a hurry. The Jounin apologized quietly, giving the guard his security pass. One of the other 3 guards verified the password and silently made a hand gesture. The guards returned to their posts while the 3 returning shinobi scaled the gate and entered their village. This wasn't how they had been expecting to return. Kakashi. Rin. Minato said gently, suppressed emotions causing his chest to tighten as he gazed at his remaining students, covered in blood and wounded. We will report to the Sandaime first, then head to the hospital. Kakashi needs his wounds looked at. He instructed calmly yet firmly, I'm fine. The youth snapped sharply, charcoal eyes burning with anger and sorrow. For now, his sensei ignored his little outburst. It was enough for him to hear his student's voice for now. With another gesture, he led them to the Hokage Tower, lights still on in the building despite the twilight hours. It was with barely concealed grief and fatigue that they made their way to the Hokage's office, startling his secretary in the process. Come in. The rough, familiar voice called as Minato knocked smartly on the door. The third was seated at his desk, unlit pipe in his mouth as the 3 entered. His gaze was sympathetic and sharp when he looked them over, rising from his seat as they trudged in. It didn't escape his notice how the young Hatake seemed to be swaying on his feet, how the medic Nin's eyes looked dead, how the blonde's face was carefully, painstakingly blank. Team Minato. He greeted them somberly, hands clasped behind his back. News of your mission reached us before you did. It was a success. His final words were halfway between a statement and a question demanding further elaboration. It was on both fronts, Sandaime-sama. Minato replied, tone carefully guarded and perfectly polite. The Kanobi Bridge was destroyed and the lines near Michiru Town cleared. No loose ends remain. However, we lost our 4th member, Uchiha Obito, in combat. His body was too badly damaged for information on the Sharingan to be recovered, and I have tended to his body as was fit. At that, Kakashi turned his gaze to his sensei sharply, his right eye wide and hurt, accusing. Minato either didn't notice or didn't care. His tone remained formal and controlled. My report will be on your desk before noon tomorrow, and I will personally convey my condolences to the Uchiha clan. Very well. The Sandaime replied, frowning at the disheveled team in front of him. It was all too clear that they were barely holding it together. The teens had hung their heads, limbs shaking slightly. I request permission to lead my team to the hospital, Minato added, inclining his head slightly. Between his student's visible distress and the man's quiet placidity, he found the latter to be more worrisome. Silently, he nodded, and the 3 moved towards the door. Team Minato, the 3rd called softly, stopping them just before they exited the room. You have my condolences as well. The aging man replied, eliciting a bow from their Jounin instructor. Thank you, Hokage-sama, was the tranquil, formal reply before Minato led his 2 students outside. Once they were out on the street, he crossed his arms, looking the 2 over. Rin, take Kakashi to the hospital, he said seriously, eyes resting on his female student. The medic Nin nodded numbly, but Kakashi was having none of it. I said I'm fine, Minato-sensei, he snapped, pupils dilating in anger. Despite his fervent proclamation, however, he choked on a moan of pain as he moved too suddenly, clutching at his face. Quickly, Rin put a hand on his uninjured shoulder, eyebrows furrowed in concern. All Minato could do was sigh wearily. You need medical attention, Kakashi. You will go to the hospital voluntarily, or I will carry you there myself. The ferocity in his sensei's voice startled the young ninja more than anything that had happened the past few hours. For several seconds, all he could do was blink at Minato, mouth half open. Come on, Kakashi. Rin coaxed him as well, tears brimming in her eyes. We need to get Obito's. I looked at. I could only do little in the field. Your arms also hurt. Please, Kakashi. Tears were streaking silently down her face now, and for once, Kakashi hung his head and didn't comment. A nod was all he gave, giving his permission to be escorted to the hospital. It brought a tearful smile to Rin's pale face. What about you, sensei? You're hurt too. I'm alright, Rin. Minato smiled softly, putting a hand on her head gently. I have to take care of something, then I'll join you. I need to finish the report for the mission and inform Obito's parents. Even for him, the last part was difficult to articulate, no matter how calm he looked on the outside. It was a white lie, of course, but his students didn't need to know how messed up he was on the inside. Go on ahead, I'll see you soon. Rin nodded and prodded Kakashi gently, leading him towards the hospital. For several moments, Minato just watched the 2 leaving, 2 dark forms huddled close together in the night. He had known their teamwork was weak. He had known they would argue, and yet he had let them go on such a difficult mission on their own, had let Kakashi lead it on his first day as Jounin. Deep down, he knew he had no choice. War was a difficult time for everyone, when children have to kill or be killed, when they have no fond memories to look back on. He knew all that, yet he felt as if he had failed them all. One quick flare of chakra was all it would take to teleport himself home, but he opted to walk. There were few people about at that time of the night, and those who were watching him pass didn't disturb him. His eyes were slightly glassy as he walked, reflecting the moonlight. The cool air on his face revived him less than he had hoped it would. Now on his own, with no one relying on him as a pillar, he felt his composure start to slip. I need to get home. His doorbell sounded like an explosion in the otherwise quiet night, almost eliciting a wince from him. He waited for almost a minute, ready to ring the bell again when he heard footsteps approaching, the door creaking only slightly as it swung open. And Minato? Came a surprised voice, wide, dark blue eyes gazing back into his own. A woman stood in the doorway to the house they shared, tangled red hair framing her face. You're covered in BL. Her startled comment was cut short when Minato leaned forward, arms wrapping themselves around her torso while he buried his face into her neck. The young Jonin's fiancé, Uzumaki Kushina, was frozen for only a few seconds before she hugged him back, stepping backwards into the house while she stroked his hair. Obito's dead. Kushina had just nudged the door closed with her foot when she froze fully, staring down at her husband's matted blonde hair. His voice was hollow, heavy in the silence with the grief it carried. She knew then that he'd been carrying the burden, had buried the feelings too long, like he would always do. Minato, she whispered softly, for once, then closed her eyes and pressed her cheek against the top of his head. Come sit down. Carefully, as if she were leading a blind, fragile man, she withdrew and led Minato into the living room, seating him on the sofa. The man didn't react, eyes brimming with emotion, but face deadpan. Seeing how his hands were shaking, Kushina sat down by him and took them in her own, afraid for him. Minato. She whispered again, hugging him close. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. For a long while, she thought her fiancé wouldn't respond at all. Then, finally, his shoulders began to shake and tears trickled onto her chest and throat, silent tribute of utter grief. And all she could do was hold him and hope for the best. There was no time for a funeral. There wasn't even a body to begin with. A name was just inscribed on the memorial stone, lost among the many Konoha shinobi that had fallen for their village, Uchiha Obito. Team Minato was sent out more and more often, taking on more and more dangerous missions. They worked well as a team. Minato and Kakashi complemented each other well, as the former struck with speed and accuracy while the latter blew through the rest with sheer force. Rin was there to watch their backs and take care of any wounds they might accumulate. Their teamwork was good, but only in battle. Their relations were starting to fall apart. Despite every effort he made, Minato couldn't get through to Kakashi. First the boy had lost his father, then his best friend. The guilt made Kakashi reckless, eager to prove his strength and avenge his fallen comrade. The teen almost seemed possessed with guarding his comrades. Rin was also distant, but besieged with quiet grief, not guilt. She spoke little more than absolute necessary, and seemed downcast most of the time. Minato feared she would make herself ill. Out of the three of them, he was the one faring the best. That was as it should be. He was the sensei, the one who had experienced loss. He knew to move on and mourn when there was time, to not let one's emotions guide them. Yet, once more, he found himself almost powerless to guide his students. Kakashi, you could have gotten yourself killed. That was unnecessarily dangerous. Minato scolded the silver-haired teen one misty afternoon, the three-man cell buried just behind enemy lines. They were on yet another sabotage mission, this time to take out a supply caravan that was heading to the front lines. The youth looked away irritably at his sensei's words, knowing all too well what he was referring to. Earlier that day, the three had attacked a small outpost of ninja, aiming to take them out and move through the guarded territory next to theirs. The plan had been going well up until one of the shinobi attacking Minato had branched off towards Rin. Despite having his own opponent, Kakashi had let his back open in order to intercept the ninja. The only thing that had saved him was Minato appearing between the two and countering his fire jutsu with one of his own water ones. Rin was open, she could have handled one opponent. Minato continued sternly, glancing once at the subdued kunoichi. Rule number 1 of the shinobi code, never let your opponent get behind you. Do you not remember that, Kakashi? He knew he was being harsher than he would have usually been, but the teen needed to snap out of his current psychology. I remember, sensei, Kakashi replied angrily. I know. But I couldn't just let her. I'm supposed to protect her. I promised Obito, he muttered, fist trembling in anger. At that, Minato pinched the bridge of his nose and sighed. Listen to me, Kakashi, he began. The sooner you do so, the less danger we're all in. This is a three-man cell now. Whether you like it or not, we're all ninja on this team. Comrades, I expect you to cover each other's backs, to help if there's a need to. What I do not expect of you is to needlessly step in when you yourself have your hands full. Rin might not be a combat ninja like me or you, but she is a medic nin. She can dodge attacks better than you, heal herself if she must. If she must, she can use her medical ninjutsu in combat. She does not need your constant vigilance, not to this level. He added softly. At Kakashi's silence, Rin bit her lip, taking a step closer to her teammate. Sensei's right, Kakashi. I'm not a weakling. The sudden statement made Kakashi's visible eye widen as he stared at the medic nin's determined face. And you better get over that, because if you get yourself trying to be heroic, I'll be at even more risk, since I'll be trying to heal you. Out of his three students, Rin was by far the most soft-spoken and quiet. That's the main reason Minato was both pleased and surprised by her little outburst. The kunoichi looked more resolute than she had ever before. War changes people. He couldn't help but muse sadly. It turns children into adults and innocence into whatever this is. It's the only way we can survive, after all. He sighed, looking over his two students that had fallen eerily silent. I'm going to take first watch tonight. Sleep on it, Kakashi, and think about it seriously. Your recklessness is a danger to this team. If I don't see improvement, I'm going to pull you off duty. His student's expression was hurt, betrayed, even murderous, but Minato bore it silently. He had to, for the team's sake. He wouldn't let another student die on his watch. Wordlessly, his two students lay down in their bedrolls, presumably falling asleep. Although on high alert, it wasn't difficult for Minato to realize Kakashi was awake for a long time. The possibility of him thinking things over was promising, but Minato knew he couldn't count on it. If it came down to it, he would have to be everywhere that little bit more, to cover Kakashi if he made another mistake. Rin awoke suddenly, a hand covering her mouth. She tried to bite at her assailant, struggling to free herself against his silencing, but stopped once she realized it was her sensei waking her up as discreetly as possibly. Upon seeing her quiet, Minato released her mouth and brought a finger to his lips. The serious look in his eyes left no room for questions. Kakashi was already up, eyes glittering in the darkness as he peered into the shadows, Sharingan uncovered. The underlying message was clear, especially from the way her sensei took hold of two of his custom-built kunai, tossing them into the trees around them. They had company. With the kunai came yells from around the trees, dark, indistinct shapes moving through the leaves. In a flash, their sensei was gone, and an accompanying scream torn from the dying lungs of an enemy nin gave them a good idea as to where. Katan, Gokakyu no Jutsu! Kakashi yelled from next to her, a great fireball rushing from his lips towards a cove of trees. Without waiting for retaliation, her Jounin teammate was gone, the clash of metal on metal surrounding her. Rin moved away from their camp, eyes alert and watchful as she tried to gain some distance in order to use her weapons and saban. Just as she leaped to a tree branch, however, a shinobi came at her out of the shadows, striking towards her throat with a kunai. Hastily, the medic nin leaned backwards, avoiding the razor-sharp blade and dodged a fierce kick towards her side, focusing. When she next connected with her opponent, their kunai met with a clang, the two ninja knives being pushed towards the opponent's body. Her enemy was a girl not a year older than herself, the emblem of IWA clear on her forehead. I have to. For Kakashi-kun, for Obito. She thought to herself and pushed harder, managing to momentarily overpower the IWA nin. Driving her opponent a foot back, the medic nin struck with a well-placed hand, causing great pain in the area she touched. The damage was only superficial, but the pain would be enough to scare a young shinobi. The IWA girl jumped back several feet, a kunai out to parry the sanban Rin threw at her. She's good. The kunoichi thought, eyebrows furrowed in concentration. A sudden clang to her right made her jump. Glancing to the side, she saw two kunai. One had been heading for her while the other intercepted it. She wasn't sure which one of her teammates had been watching her back, but the medic nin realized she wasn't doing the same. Her opponent didn't give her that much time to think after that. The next few heartbeats passed in a flurry of kunai attacks and blocks, kicks and punches that landed or didn't. The older girl landed a hard kick to her abdomen, sending her crashing back against a tree trunk. A choked cry managed to slip past her lips, and the girl was on her in seconds. A kunai flew past her face, suddenly, freezing the enemy kunoichi in her tracks. The girl looked around once, and that was when Rin struck. Her kunai sliced into the girl's neck, lodging into it several inches. The medic nin tried not to flinch as her enemy fell to the ground, dead or certainly dying. Pulling out several sanban, she looked around. Two opponents were fighting with Kakashi a minute away from her. She couldn't see her sensei anywhere, but that thought barely registered. Taking aim, she shot the poisoned saban towards Kakashi's opponents, pulling one off of him for as long as it took Kakashi to impale one with his chidori. The Rin of a few months ago would have been appalled at the blood spurting everywhere. Now, every drop of enemy blood was blood her comrades got to keep. Rin, behind you! Kakashi cried suddenly, dashing towards her. The medic nin jumped, turning around sharply and managing to parry the ninja blade that would have split her in half. Disconnecting, she jumped back and parried several lightning-fast blows, soon becoming offensive herself. Duck! She heard Kakashi again and instinctively she threw herself backwards. The blue lightning crackle of his lightning jutsu was seared into her brain forever as the enemy shinobi's chest was ripped apart before her eyes, splattering her with blood and shredded organs. Are you alright? Kakashi asked urgently, bending towards her. What Rin saw, however, made her eyes widen like saucers. Kakashi, watch out! She screamed, her eyes closing tightly. An explosion shook the two Konoha nin abruptly, almost throwing them from the branch. They had to use chakra to keep themselves in place. For several seconds, the two comrades could only blink in the aftermath of the light blindness, then the horror of the scene truly unfurled in front of them. 30 feet away lay the ninja that had been sparring with Kakashi earlier, half buried inside a tree trunk. Rin wanted to throw up when she realized there was a perfectly spherical hole in his abdomen, innards and charred stomach tissues spilling out onto the forest ground. Their sensei was slightly crouched right in front of them, not 2 feet away from where they stood. He was shaking slightly. "Kakashi Rin," he said quietly, breathlessly, the tone in his voice scaring the kunoichi. After a minute pause, though, he straightened and bent to retrieve one of his Hiraishin kunai from the tree branch at his feet. "We were fine, Minato-sensei." Rin stuttered, checking Kakashi and herself for injuries. "Nothing appears to be hurt more than a scratch or a graze." "Good," he replied, still in that odd tone Rin didn't like at all. Kakashi's eyes narrowed dangerously and he straightened, his grip on a kunai tightening. Before he could act, Minato jumped down to the ground and touched a finger to the blood-splattered earth. "And no one's nearby," he assessed, sensing for any chakra other than theirs. "We should burn the bodies," and he was interrupted by a violent coughing fit that had Rin by his side in seconds. "Sensei!" she exclaimed, mouth dropping fearfully at the sight of a kunai wedged in his chest. She helped her teacher sit, heart speeding up when blood trickled out of his mouth. "It must have punctured a lung. Why didn't you speak up sooner?" she demanded angrily, tears gathering in her eyes. The look on her face had Minato chuckling, though the motion brought him pain. "I needed to secure the area first," he apologized as Rin took a deep breath, calming herself. The annoyed and worried look on her face didn't leave, however. "I'm going to pull the kunai out," she warned him. Minato had barely enough time for a grunt before sharp pain blossomed in his chest again, causing more blood to trickle out of his mouth. Kakashi had dropped down by them, watching silently as Rin healed the wound to the best of her ability. "Is he going to be all right?" he asked her when she had stopped channeling her chakra, adding a little antiseptic to the surface of the red, irritated scar. Through the pain, Minato chuckled again. "Of course I will be. One little kunai doesn't do that much damage. Besides, we have Rin here to take care of us." He smiled faintly, rising to his feet despite Rin's protests. He wiped the blood from his chin with his sleeve. "Kakashi, burn the bodies with the fire jutsu. Or better yet, throw them onto that tree," he amended, looking at the tree Kakashi had set on fire earlier. "Whatever's easier for you." "I'd do it, but I put a little too much chakra into that last Rasengan." Neither one of his students commented, glancing with a shudder at the disemboweled corpse. As he sensed for his remaining Hiraishin kunai, Rin followed him to make sure he was all right. "How did you get hit in the first place, sensei?" she asked him quietly, almost afraid of the answer. If the man she thought almost untouchable could get so injured, what chance did they have? "It was my fault," Kakashi answered her before Minato had a chance to catch his breath. "I rushed to help you against that ninja without taking care of the other opponent first. I left my flank open. I was reckless, and because of that, sensei got hurt." The young jounin made a few hand seals and set another body on fire, perhaps a little too violently. He decided it would take much more effort to drag bodies around, and that burning more woodland would erase more evidence of their fight. "I went and jumped in again where I wasn't needed. Because of that, you could have died, sensei. Because of that. You see what I was telling you about now, Kakashi?" Minato said seriously, turning to look at him, paused in his search for his last missing kunai. In a shinobi squad, no matter how many members it has, if one of the members leaves his flank open, the others will do their best to guard his back. But when a shinobi leaves his flank open almost voluntarily, there's too little time to react. Mistakes will be made and people you care for will get hurt because of your bad decisions. "I know it's hard, Kakashi, but you need to trust us to keep ourselves alive more." The sorrowful look in Kakashi's eyes was enough of an answer for his sensei, who just smiled and walked up to him, ruffling the boy's hair. Kakashi looked up at his smiling teacher with wide, surprised eyes, blinking slowly. "Besides," Minato continued, smiling warmly now, "I promise you won't see my name written on that memorial stone for a long, long time." He grinned. "I promise you, I don't plan on dying just yet." Even though they knew that was a promise no one could keep, even though they knew this war would cost them more friends, more loved ones, both students nodded at their sensei's empty promise. They needed to believe in him, that he would do everything to keep his word. In the end, he broke both of those promises, but only one member of Team Minato remained to remind him at his gravestone. "Here, sensei. This was all that's currently available in Konoha. You'll have to wait for our supplies to be replenished before you can get any more." "Thanks, Kakashi," Minato replied to the silver-haired jounin with a grin, taking the small box from his former student's hands. His face turning serious for a moment, he removed the lid and inspected the sheets of paper and bottles of ink inside. "Not as good as I would have hoped for, but they'll suffice for now until I can get some of higher quality. I still have the contact Jiraiya-sensei used for his own sealing supplies." Despite his voice remaining calm and collected, Kakashi could easily tell the subject was still a touchy one. However, he knew he was in no position to pry. He was almost certain his sensei would do the same to him as soon as he could. "I also sent Naruto to the blacksmith to retrieve your kunai," the jounin continued, one half-closed eye watching his teacher as he inspected the sealing paper and ink. "I never stated who the kunai were for, but judging by the look on his face, he was well familiar with the design." "Good. That will play into our favor," his former teacher replied, overturning the box and setting it on his knees. Taking the first sheet, Minato closed his eyes and focused his chakra into the paper, dividing it into smaller pieces that would fit his kunai handles. Standing close by, Kakashi watched the familiar sight nostalgically, though his expression remained indifferent. Are you still insistent on tomorrow's training session? Kakashi asked his sensei at length, waiting until the blonde had completed one of the seals in order to not disturb his concentration. You mustn't overexert your body, sensei. We're most likely going to need your combat skills in the near future, I'm aware. Minato replied, putting down the brush and looking up at his student seriously. Today's training has eased most of my stiff muscles and I'm almost satisfied with my chakra manipulation. However, I still want to test a few things before I'm forced into using them, the Hiration. Kakashi concluded for him, eliciting a smile from Minato. Others as well, but the Hiration remains my priority at the moment. Now that I have the chance to stock up on my kunai, I need to familiarize myself with them again. Teleporting to that seal on your chest was just too easy. He added as an afterthought, grinning slightly. Kakashi rolled his eyes, folding his arms across his chest. I'm not sure fighting Naruto will be good for you, sensei, he remarked, making Minato look up from where he was preparing to start on the next seal. A raised eyebrow prompted him to continue. He's strong. Most likely stronger than me, I'm aware. Then why fight him now, when you're not in prime condition? You can't pretend this is only for training purposes. Kakashi's tone remained calm throughout his observations, just looking at his sensei. In turn, Minato chuckled slightly and finished the seal he was working on, grateful the memories hadn't faded in the slightest. You know me all too well, Kakashi, was the only thing he said, a least smile on his face as he continued drawing up the seals. Kakashi exhaled tragically, but said no more on the matter. He knew his sensei was too stubborn to back down now. Besides, he would be there to make sure it didn't get out of hand. Huh? Fight you? Naruto asked the next day, a puzzled look on the young man's face. He raised a hand to scratch his head, eyes narrowed in confusion at his father. Aren't you sparring with Kakashi-sensei again? Though his expression might have seemed dumb to some people, Minato found his son adorable in that moment, in the sense that he looked just like his mother. His near-constant smile widened slightly. To really get into shape again, I need to exercise, Naruto, he explained patiently, bright eyes sparkling. That includes facing a sparring partner whose style I'm not so familiar with. Furthermore, I've heard you being called the #1 unpredictable ninja, so this match should be interesting. That is, of course, only if you want to. A concerned look crossed his face when his son stopped smiling, just looking at him. If I want to? Naruto repeated slowly, his head bowed, shoulders shaking slightly. Kakashi raised an eyebrow slightly, gazing at the young ninja with half an interest. It was times like these when Naruto lived up to his nickname. His sensei, of course, wasn't aware of that, judging by the barely concealed worry on his face. That only made the jounin smile that playful smile of his. If I want to? Naruto repeated again, cracking a grin. I get to fight the 4th Hokage. All right. Enthusiastically, the blonde punched the air, then started bouncing on the spot. So, when do we get started? At the eager expression on his face, Minato laughed and ruffled his son's hair. Well, we're already out here, he said, gesturing to the trees around them. Only 10 minutes ago, the three had arrived in the clearing from yesterday's training session. Kakashi had carried one of his sensei's custom kunai with him, allowing him to teleport himself to the clearing when the former sent a chakra signal into one of the former Hokage's seals. We've got a lot of work to do today, so I should like it if we started soon. Kakashi, how soon will Sakura arrive? He questioned the masked jounin, turning towards him slightly. He would have been happy to train without a medic nin present, but he would take no risks concerning their physical condition. His body was still recuperating, and the techniques they could both use were powerful enough to potentially cause damage without any such intent. That being a training session, the risk was unnecessary. She shouldn't be much longer. Kakashi drawled in reply, taking out one of his books and reading the small print leisurely. At the sight of the book, Minato rolled his eyes, making Naruto snigger. Geez, Kakashi-sensei, always with those perverted books, he muttered, eliciting no reply. Kakashi merely looked up at him, expression indifferent. You just can't experience fine literature, Naruto, he replied in a bored tone. I'll need something to distract me while you two spar, after all. Of course you will, Minato commented lightly, smiling at the stoic jounin. He was distracted, however, as Sakura appeared, carrying a basket of soldier pills the size of small eggs. Naruto visibly turned green at the sight of them, leading Minato to conclude that the medicine must be awful. Pushing the thought to the back of his mind, he approached the Mednin to brief her on the plans for the day and what would most likely be needed of her. As his sensei talked to the kunoichi, Kakashi shot him a covert look, then turned to Naruto. Naruto, he called in a quiet voice. The serious tone to it caught the blonde's attention and elicited a puzzled look. Looking back at the blue-eyed young man, Kakashi was intensely reminded of his sensei at a younger age. The memory made him pause, then sigh inwardly. Good luck today. Watch your back, he's fast. Try and avoid his hands as much as possible, or else he might get a chance to place a seal on you. I know already, Naruto answered, now grinning resolutely. His eyes flashed with excitement and determination. "I'm not going to lose to him, 4th Hokage or not," he declared, fist clenched. "I'd like to see that." Came a light voice to his right, startling him. The young ninja smiled sheepishly as his father approached him, smiling as always. "Since Kakashi-chan has already given you some tips, I expect a good challenge from you." He smiled, then stepped away from the two and headed further into the clearing, where they would be less likely to hit close to the onlookers. After a minute pause, Naruto followed him, each step feeling heavy. His entire body felt odd, as if tingling with the anticipation of fighting his hero. A wide grin split his face as he settled opposite his father, leaving about 20 feet between them. He barely noticed his father's smile turning into a playful smirk. "Begin!" Minato called, immediately jumping into action. He sped towards his son, launching a kunai at him. Naruto dodged the oncoming projectile easily, but had to somersault backwards to avoid a slash aimed at his chest. "He's fast." The teen managed to think while he dodged several attacks, the two dancing around the clearing. He parried a jab at his shoulder with his own kunai, but his eyes widened when he realized his kunai was caught between two of the prongs of a three-pronged kunai. Easily, Minato twisted his blade and wrenched the weapon out of his son's grip. Leaping backwards, Naruto dodged another strike, grinning slightly. His eyes caught the gleam of his father's kunai as it dropped to the grass, but he thought no more of it as another one was launched towards his current position. Two more succeeded the first, but those missed by a large margin. "The stage is set," Kakashi thought to himself, watching the two from the top of his book. Sakura was also watching closely, eyes moving from one to the other. Skidding to a halt on the grass, Naruto grinned cheekily at his father 30 feet away and formed a hand seal. "Time I got serious as well. Tajua Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." Minato's eyes widened slightly as hundreds of Naruto's shadow clones appeared in the clearing. The blonde jounin didn't have much time to think on his course of action as dozens of clones rained down on him, yelling. Much like his former student had done when Naruto returned from his training with Jiraiya, the blonde fought them off with taijutsu, his movements faster than the previous day. Clones disappeared left and right as they were dispelled, but Kakashi wasn't fooled by the display. His taijutsu is still not at its usual speed. He's holding back, probably waiting to see what Naruto will do. The Hatake thought, yes blank as he surveyed the scene before him. The clones were growing increasingly irritated. Together, they all launched themselves into the air, bombarding Minato with tens of bodies. In reaction, the jounin weaved several hand seals at blinding speed, adopting a pose Naruto knew all too well. "Suetun, Suijin Hiki," he called, and water rose around him, trapping the clones that had descended onto the jutsu. "Suiriden," a roaring beast made out of water rose out of his defensive technique, striking at 36 clones and dispelling them. The remaining few clones cursed as the walls of water were lowered and a slightly damp Minato stepped out. A sudden whirling noise caught the jounin by surprise. On one foot, he pivoted around, eyes widening dramatically at what he saw. Naruto was charging him from behind, a deep orange shade surrounding his altered eyes. In his hand was a whirling ball of energy that was his own Rasengan. "Rasengan!" Naruto called, his arm thrusting forwards towards his father's chest, just a few feet away. The jutsu was small, much smaller than he could produce, but still powerful. The young shinobi was grinning in triumph, watching his father's expression turn from shock to mingled emotions of pride and something he couldn't read. "It's over," he called as the technique slammed into his father's chest and missed. "Yeah?" he called, stumbling as his jutsu hit thin air, managing to end the jutsu before it hit the ground and exploded on him. On the other side of the clearing, his father's body slammed into the ground at high speed, eliciting a pained grunt from him. "Damn it," he dodged, Naruto whined, getting to his feet. 40 feet away, the 4th Hokage also rose to his feet, winded from the force of the impact. Using his Hiraishin so suddenly had left him slightly breathless, but he was glad he had set up the teleportation kunai earlier. A smile was on his face as he gazed at his son, taking in the changes to his physical appearance again. "I see," he used a multitude of shadow clones to let one slip away and gather nature chakra. That way, he could ambush me from behind when I was most distracted. His body just a small flash of light, Minato suddenly zoomed across the clearing and began taking out the remaining shadow clones at such a speed Naruto couldn't keep up, even in Sannin mode. When only 3 clones in the original remained, Minato paused, unable to help a proud smile spreading on his face. "Can you see him, Kushina? He's grown strong." Focusing back on the fight, the jounin considered his options. "As long as he's in Sage mode, his Rasengan will be stronger than mine. I need to take him out of it, and find any other clones he might have hidden." With that thought, his features turned serious and in another lash, he was gone. Naruto blinked at the suddenly empty clearing, closing his eyes. When he concentrated, he realized his father was only about 20 feet out into the forest. With a determined frown, he gathered chakra for another Rasen Shuriken, one he would throw, this time. However, as he began moving, his father did, too, in the direction of one of his clones. Before Naruto could even change direction, the man had teleported himself to his remaining hidden clone and dispelled it. A rush of nature chakra flowed into Naruto's original body, but he hadn't needed it, not yet. Damn, he muttered as he ran after his father's trail. He's getting rid of the shadow clones I have gathering nature chakra. So fast I have to catch up to him. A minute later, he suddenly skidded to a halt and leaped out of the way as a wave of air sliced its way towards him, narrowly missing him and his remaining shadow clones. The Raisin Shuriken he had ready dispersed as he lost his focus for a second, leaving him slightly drained of chakra. I've only got one more shot at it without gathering more nature chakra, he thought, gritting his teeth in frustration. Without giving him time to prepare another attack, Minato charged his son, aiming a kick at his head. The clone he had attacked managed to duck and engage him, the two swapping punches and kicks. When a second clone jumped in, Minato ducked as both attacked simultaneously, taking them out with a kunai slice. He had time enough to look up as a whirling noise filled his ears again. Naruto was descending upon him from above, a whirling white chakra shuriken in his hands. Waiting for him to come closer in order to slam the jutsu into his body, Minato was shocked when his son threw the shuriken at him, unable to dodge. Naruto landed on a branch above just as his jutsu connected with his father's body, blasting him off the tree. His satisfaction was cut short, however, when his father's body dissolved into water. A water clone. But that means dash. He was cut short when he felt chakra flaring around him. Glancing around at the sources, he realized with horror that he was trapped in a circle of paper stuck to trees. As one, the ink on them flared bright blue and Naruto yelled out loud, feeling chakra being pulled out of his body. The seals Minato had hastily set up were deactivated quickly, ink now a deep orange color as Naruto wobbled on the branch. The orange pattern around his eyes vanished. Before he could fully recover, Naruto saw his father leap up at him, a large, greenish Rasengan held in his open palm. Barely making it in time, Naruto used his remaining clone to create a Rasengan of his own, smaller than his father's, but also powerful. He moved forward just as Minato neared him, the two Rasengans slamming into each other. The blast that was produced sent both of them flying backwards. Naruto winded as he was propelled straight through two tree trunks and into a large boulder. He barely managed to get his bearings before his father appeared in front of him, kunai drawn and pointed at his chest, though he remained a few feet away. As father and son gazed at each other, both panting slightly from the exertion, Kakashi appeared between them in a puff of smoke, cutting Naruto off from the hand seal he was about to form. The silver-haired Jounin's expression was somewhere between amused and exasperated, two hands raised palm up as if to break up the spar. "Alright, that's enough," he said in a light voice. Beside him, Minato smiled and nodded, replacing his kunai in its holster. Kakashi stepped back as his former sensei approached his son, extending a hand to pull him up with a smile. Naruto took it, gazing up at his father with wide eyes. "You've really become strong, Naruto." He smiled at him, the emotion clear in his eyes. Thanks," Naruto replied, then grinned. "The fourth Hokage, no, Dad thinks I'm strong," he thought inwardly, unable to not feel very pleased with himself. At his exuberant expression, Minato just flashed his usual smile, while Kakashi sighed in exasperation. "I'm going to gather my kunai," Minato told both of them, removing one from the ground at his feet and vanishing as he flew to the others to collect them. Naruto blinked after him, still overwhelmed by their intense fight. Kakashi smirked at that, putting a hand on his shoulder out of the blue. "Next time, watch out for the shadow clones," was the only thing he said before he disappeared in a puff of smoke, leaving Naruto alone to return to the clearing. When all three were gathered at the clearing, Kakashi informed them Minato would likely teleport himself back to the tent without waiting for them, so the three members of Team 7 headed off. Sakura insisted on checking Naruto for injuries, though there were none other than several bruises and a cracked rib from the last impact. Although she healed the rib, the Mednin was sure Naruto would be fully healed by tomorrow, given his unnatural healing speed. Several people greeted them as they returned to the village, some even stopping to chat. Tochi and Aya Michiraku, the owners of Naruto's favorite ramen restaurant, stopped him to inform him that they would soon rebuild the shop, as soon as the basic structures were complete. Even though only 4 days had passed since the village was entirely destroyed, progress was fast concerning the temporary homes. The village shinobi were efficient with their ninjutsu. Strong albeit crowded shelters were going up at a startling pace. Even without their Hokage, the village was in control, fighting. Granny Tsunade, Naruto thought sadly, gazing at the current Hokage's carved face on the Hokage mountain. Inevitably, his gaze lingered on the Hokage's face just below her own. The severe carving failed to convey the fourth's natural charisma, Naruto realized. It would have been out of place amidst the otherwise stern faces of high fellow Hokage, but the fourth's figure would have been better captured had it had a smile. Naruto was convinced of that, after only 3 days with the man his father. "How's Granny Tsunade?" he asked, turning to Sakura and tearing his eyes from the mountain. His teammate's sad look was all he needed in reply as the kunoichi shook her head. "Same as always," she answered sadly. Tactfully for one, Naruto dropped the subject. Kakashi looked up, but made no comment. He was reading as they walked back to the tent, although Sakura left them midway. "I see you're back," Minato commented as they entered the tent, Naruto sitting straight down on his futon. Kakashi gazed his sensei a questioning look, noticing the man holding one of his sealed kunai close to his face. Did they work as they should have? The jounin asked, gaze returning to his book. Yes. Minato replied calmly, still inspecting the seal. Naruto had laid back onto his back, but now turned to watch his father at work. However, the seals I activated seem minutely worn. I was afraid of this with the amount of chakra I channel into the seals. I need top-quality sealing paper and ink to get something even close to semi-permanent seals. A sigh left his lips as he replaced the kunai in its holster. It will do for now, though. The 15 kunai I have now are still too few, however. Can you arrange for more to be made, Kakashi? In response, his student nodded. Both turned towards the flap as Shikaka pulled it back, stooping to enter the tent. Naruto was the only one taken aback, sitting up abruptly. Shikaku-akan! He exclaimed, blinking at the man with wide eyes. Shikamaru's father glanced at the boy, nodding. I trust your training session went well? He inquired, addressing Minato and Kakashi more than Naruto. In response, Minato turned to glance at Naruto, smiling. Yes, it did. I'm fully satisfied with my chakra and elemental manipulation. My body is mostly recovered, though it could do with a night's rest. More importantly, my Hiraishin didn't suffer with death. At his analysis, the Nara nodded, folding his arms. Rumors have spread across the entire village that the fourth Hokage is back. Some have even begun reporting he's back to full strength and fighting for them. Minato didn't miss the satisfied smirk discernible through Kakashi's mask. The council is also discussing them and have questioned me several times. It's time to make our move. When, then, do you propose? Minato asked his former comrade critically, Azure eyes serious and determined. I'm ready. Tomorrow. He agreed, Azure eyes blazing and brilliant. Looking at the man he had seen as a sensei and leader, at the way his shoulders were set and his mere presence radiated strength and determination, Kakashi was reminded of older, better times. The fire's shadow illuminates the village. I'm gonna be a mother, you know. The woman's voice is loud, excited. Her deep blue eyes are shining in joy, smile as wide as he'd ever seen it. In turn, his expression changes from shock to one of equal bliss. His arms encircle her, hold her close. And I'm going to become a father! He exclaims, not caring if the statement is redundant. He's never felt such happiness welling in him before, and he tightens his hug around the woman he loves more than anything in the world. I'm gonna be a mother, you know! His wife repeats, greater excitement in her voice. Her face is close to his, sparkling eyes looking into blazing ones. And I'm going to become a father! He also repeats, giving her perhaps the silliest grin he's ever given another human being. Both are giddy with the news, overwhelmed. Their noses touch and, almost as if they're reading each other's thoughts, they kiss, his fingers running through her beautiful red hair, pulling her closer. Without warning, he breaks the kiss off and lifts her off her feet, spinning her around wildly. Everything and everyone else are forgotten. For the moment, it's just them two and they're happy. When they tell his team, their reactions don't fail to disappoint him. The girl is instantly wide-eyed and smiling, asking his wife about her pregnancy and how everything is going. The silver-haired boy stares at his sensei's sheepish grin, charcoal eyes scanning his face and smile. He says nothing for several long moments, then closes his eyes and shrugs. Congratulations, sensei. He says in a sincere tone, and he knows the boy is pleased. The scene changes and he's sitting down by her, his face resting against her substantial stomach. The baby has grown well and he can feel his son's feet occasionally kicking against his cheek. He insists it's a boy, but of course she disagrees. She has a mother's intuition, he has a Hokage's. Whatever the child will be, he's never been happier than he is then. Her fingers are gently stroking through his hair, playing with the long, fair strands and causing them to stand even more to attention than usual. His eyes are closed and he can hear her heartbeat, feel her breathing. In that moment, he could lose everything but them, and he would still be happy. His everything is in his arms, and that's how he always wants it to be. I can't wait to meet you, little one. He murmurs against his wife's stomach, one hand idly rubbing the place where the baby was kicking. He looks up and meets her gentle eyes with his own, their grins as wide as could be. Once again, he is thankful he has her. The night is dark. Suddenly, he's alone and cold, pain clenching his chest. Afraid, he wonders where his wife and child are, where the warmth of their room went. Then he remembers. The rain has washed away the blood in the ruined streets. Debris has fallen everywhere where buildings once stood, but it's not the destroyed city he is looking at. He moves towards a lit road, where many figures are headed. They're dressed in black. Eyes widening, he remembers. He knows he doesn't want to, but he follows the people he knew, his friends, his comrades, his student, his sensei. He follows them outside the town, where there is less damage. He follows them to the cemetery, where a funeral is being held. He stops and stares at the most elaborate coffin, where his body lies. Strangely enough, he feels nothing when confronted with his own corpse. After death, he's been cleaned and healed, a preservation jutsu laying over his body. It means nothing to him. He gave his life willingly, and refuses to regret it. When he sees her, all thought stops. She lies still and silent, skin as white as snow. she was never quiet. Her red hair, the color of blood, is fanned out around her, limp strands lying tangled across the pale satin. Her eyes are wide open, white and empty, mouth hanging open in a silent scream of agony. Her hands are clutching her stomach, where a gaping hole still remains in her body. As he watches with horrified eyes, blood the color of her hair begins to spread out of the wound, staining the satin, red staining white, and filling the coffin. Before his very eyes, the blood rises to cover her entirely, filling the coffin to the brim before overflowing and pooling onto the muddy ground below. He screams. This time, it took great mental effort to tear himself out of the nightmare. Lying awake, Minato blinked several times, finally raising a hand to wipe away the tears that were still streaking down his face. A sob almost made its way past his lips, but he managed to stifle it with his hand. The last thing he wanted was to draw attention to himself. Sitting up, he realized that he'd managed to wake himself up in the middle of the night again. A loud snore drew his attention to Naruto, who was sprawled in all directions while asleep. The sight managed to bring a smile to his face, though it was faint and tearful. Sniffling slightly, the former Hokage wiped the remainder of his tears away, exhaling measuredly. He sat like that for a long time, watching his son snoring away blissfully. Watching Naruto seemed to bring him out of his gloom little by little, easing the ache in his chest. After an hour, Minato eased himself back on the futon, knowing he had to get some sleep. The next day was going to be a long one. Idly, one hand reached out, touching the empty space left on the portable mattress. Another sob threatened to slip out. He really wasn't used to sleeping alone. Even out on missions, she would always crawl into his sleeping sack during the night. Kushina, he whispered into the darkness, azure eyes staring into space. I miss you so much. Finally! I was getting sick of that crap. Naruto's voice was loud in the early morning, but then again, the young ninja was always enthusiastic when it came to food. Minato watched in amazement as he dug into the rice eagerly, still not used to the way his son shoveled down huge mouthfuls. Kakashi had to smirk at the odd look on his sensei's face. Not even Kushina could eat that quickly. Unlike his son, Minato was barely touching his food. After Naruto finished his third bowl, Minato reached over wordlessly and emptied his own into his son's despite not having eaten even a third of it. Puzzled, Naruto glanced from the offered food to his father, blinking slowly. Eat? He asked, tilting his head to the side slightly. Aren't you going to eat that? At the expression on his face, Minato managed to smile tensely, though at least his eyes were warm. No, so you might as well have it, Naruto. His father replied cheerfully, setting his empty bowl down. Kakashi, who was standing to the side, didn't say anything, even though he found his sensei refusing food somewhat worrisome. Given the circumstances, however, he attributed it to nerves and decided to ignore it for the moment. He decided to mention it only should the incident repeat itself. With nothing to do with his hands and his two companions silent, Minato started fiddling with the hem of his blue shirt, head slightly bent. Even though he'd lain awake half the night thinking about possible situations when confronted with the villagers, he was fretting something would go wrong. Worst-case scenarios began playing through his mind, only serving to make him even more nervous. The silver-haired jounin to his right watched him silently, snapping shut the book he had been reading. The man in front of him was one known for his ability to remain calm and positive in even the worst situations. Watching him worry was truly a rare sight. Still, the situation was exceptional. Kakashi could only hope to distract his former sensei and hope his natural optimism returned. Sensei, he said calmly, drawing the former Hokage's attention. Along with what we discussed yesterday, Shikaku and I thought it best to return these to you. You were wearing them when we found you, but had to remove them for convenience's sake. Both blondes looked on curiously as the copy nin reached down into a bag and pulled out two folded items, one green, the other white. As he was handed them, Minato's eyes widened in shock and recognition. Hands trembling slightly, the fourth stood up and unfolded the two garments, his jounin flak vest and white, flaming Hokage coat. You, he breathed, for once speechless. Kakashi smiled lightly as he watched the emotions flickering on his sensei's face. The fourth's coat! Naruto suddenly exclaimed, staring at the long, white coat the fourth had been famous for. Minato turned to his son, wide eyes gazing at him before he finally seemed to break out of the trance. A genuine smile on his face, he handed Kakashi the coat to hold while he donned his flak jacket, then pulled the coat on. The fabric felt familiar, warm against his skin. For a few moments, he just stood there, feeling his two companions' eyes on him, Naruto's more awestruck than appraising. Kakashi felt his eyes drawn to the kanji on his sensei's back, Yondaime Hokage. The sight of his long-dead teacher in his signature coat brought on a wave of nostalgia, but as always, the jounin fought it down. If that doesn't turn a few heads, I doubt anything will, he commented dryly instead, eliciting another small, but genuine smile from Minato. I suppose you're right. Dad, you look awesome. Naruto grinned, swallowing a huge mouthful and setting his bowl down. He stood up himself, tying his forehead protector into place and pulling on his ninja sandals. At the sight of the Konoha insignia on his son's forehead, Minato blinked, making a mental note to retrieve his from his coffin or replace it. Thanks, Naruto. He smiled slightly, then let out a long breath. His shoulders tensed, then straightened, head held high. We should go join the rebuilding efforts before the day gets any older. His tone was more self-assured now, anxiety down to low levels, Kakashi noted, pleased. Donning his coat had calmed the former Hokage, it seemed, for which the Jounin was grateful. Beside them, Naruto was as cheerful as always, determination glinting in his eyes. All right. Let's do this. The village of Konohagakure was busy as ever before, hundreds of people, shinobi and civilians alike, scattered throughout, either clearing the rubble that still remained from Pain's attack or helping in the various construction sites. Although the village morale was low due to the devastation and the condition of their Hokage, loud chatter was still present as the people worked in the bright sunlight in order to rebuild their beloved village. In the eastern side of town, there was a sharp gasp and silence fell over the gathered people. Not at all uncomfortable in the silence, Naruto grinned at the villagers and waved at those he knew. He happily went to help two villagers with a heavy beam of wood, electing to ignore the fact that they were both frozen. Everyone was, but their gaze wasn't focused on him. All eyes were glued on one figure that had walked up to them with Naruto and Hatake Kakashi, a warm smile on his face. The sunlight reflected off his blonde hair just like it did off of Naruto's, eyes as deeply cerulean as the sky. Minato managed to hide any trace of nervousness as the villagers turned to him with a collective gasp, mouths hanging open. Everyone had practically stopped in their tracks, watching him as he approached them. Briefly, Naruto distracted him as he lifted the wooden beam up, the two civilians relinquishing it easily. His son's contentment was enough to ease his smile even more before he glanced around at him again, eyes bright as he looked at the people. Suddenly, movement higher up caught his sharp eyes and he was instantly focused on a middle-aged man standing on a construction platform perhaps 15 feet in the air. The man had dropped the hammer he was holding, turning roughly on the narrow plank of wood. The arc, the latter was a surprised cry as he overbalanced on the unsteady platform, toppling over backwards. Kakashi didn't even flinch as his sensei's eyes narrowed, barely a blur as he shot forwards, leaping into the air to catch the man and alight upon the wall he had been adding to. A collective gasp rose out of the onlookers as Minato lightly jumped down to the ground, setting the man onto his shaking feet. Are you alright, Watanabe-san? He asked the man he had recognized from his youth, his smile brilliant and warm as it had always been. There was a stunned pause as everyone held their breath, then started yelling all at once. The fourth is back. Is it really him? He's alive? It's a miracle. It must be him. Look at the coat. He's back. Dropping everything, the people surged forwards towards him, each person trying to touch him, to get close to him. Everyone was talking at the same time, questions and prayers yelled in elated voices. While the civilians had seemed to accept Minato easily, the few present shinobi had held back, still stunned and on their guard. At the ruckus, several more from surrounding areas had hurried to inspect the cause of the commotion, but they too remained frozen, unsure as to how to act. Seeing Naruto and Kakashi standing to the side, the latter casually reading a book, and Anbu alighted down next to him, crouched slightly. What is the meaning of this, Kakashi-san? The faceless shinobi asked, eyes glued on Minato as he laughed sheepishly and tried to talk to everyone at the same time. The situation is as you see it, Usagi-san. Kakashi replied in a bored tone of voice, not even looking up from his book. By means of the jutsu that resurrected the dead 5 days ago, the fourth Hokage was also brought back to life. I leave it to Nara Shikaku to brief you on the subject. In the meantime, there is no cause for alarm. You mean to say that man is really Hokage-sama? The rabbit-masked Anbu persisted, hesitant. Kakashi side-glanced at him, snapping his book shut. Precisely. He answered and slipped the slim book into his weapons pouch, turning towards Naruto, who had paused while carrying the heavy beam to watch the villagers cluster around his father. The young ninja had a silly grin on his face, though Kakashi felt as if there was an undertone of understanding to it, masked well beneath his jovial expression. Naruto! The appellation got the blonde's attention even above the noise the crowd was making. We've still got work to do, his sensei reminded him, watching him through a deceptively languid eye as the blonde grinned and nodded. Asa! He grinned, raising high hands to form a familiar seal. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. The crowd paused for a moment as a dozen Narutos appeared around them, two taking the heavy beam from where the original had set it down. All right, everyone. We've work to do. In a chorus of Asas and Yashas, his clones saluted him and set to work on moving the beams towards where they would be needed. Upon seeing the relaxed way the Hatake and Naruto were dealing with Minato's presence, the few shinobi still uncertain gathered together, eyes wide and mouths grinning. Hokage-sama is back. The yondaime, he's alive. I bet it's all thanks to Naruto. At the praise thrown his way, Naruto grinned sheepishly, one finger rubbing his upper lip. The crowd around Minato was still talking rapidly and loudly, so much so the former Hokage could hardly keep up. Seeing his father just standing there, Naruto crossed his arms and frowned, slightly irritated. Hey, Dad! He called, voice slightly whiny. Don't just stand there and let me do all the work. Sheesh! He complained, helping a shadow clone move a heavy boulder out of their way. At the accusation, Minato just chuckled wryly and rubbed the back of his head, ignoring the fresh bombardment of chatter around him. With a light smile, he raised his hands palm up and tried to get the crowd's attention. They hung on his every word. "All right, everyone." He smiled his dazzling smile, bright eyes warm as he looked at many familiar faces. "I know this is all very sudden, and I will explain in due time. Right now, however, Konoha needs our help to recover back to her old strength. I'm well aware that the work is hard, but please bear with me." Kakashi looked on with an indifferent facade as his sensei talked, wondering whether the man knew his natural charisma was holding the crowd captive. His sincere smile and honest eyes had always held an incredibly powerful allure to them, after all. Even the onlooking shinobi, still startled somewhat, were nodding at the former Hokage's words. "Of course, Hokage-sama,"